Good evening and welcome to tonight's City Council meeting for August 17th, 2026. I'd first ask that we close the non-public session and seal the minutes of that session.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Sally, will you please take the roll?
Mayor McEachern.
Here.
Assistant Mayor Kelly.
Here.
Councilor Cook.
Here.
Councilor Blaylock.
Present.
Councilor Bagley.
Here.
Councilor Moreau.
Here.
Councilor Flynn.
Here.
Councilor Hopkins.
Here.
And absent tonight is Councilor Tabor.
I would ask that the Portsmouth Little League state champions lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. You guys start.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I didn't tell you about that before. I could have handled it well. We have the acceptance of minutes for the August 3rd, 2026 City Council meeting.
Your Honor, I move to accept and approve the meeting minutes for August 3rd, 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And now on to a proclamation and a recognition. First, we have the proclamation of National Service Dog Month, and Brendan Madden here to receive it. Whereas September is National Dog Month, created to raise awareness and show appreciation for the extraordinary work careful, trained, and certified service dogs do every day for the people in their care, to honor the dedicated individuals who train and care for these remarkable animals, and to celebrate the profound bond between service dogs and the individuals they serve. And whereas service dogs are specially trained to perform specific tasks for people with disabilities as defined by the Americans with Disabilities Act, they can be trained to retrieve objects, assist with balance, give seizure or diabetic alerts, or assist with those psychiatric disabilities. Many also serve veterans living with post-traumatic stress and traumatic brain injury, helping them better manage their disabilities and live fuller lives. And whereas these special dogs exemplify the healing power of the human-animal bond, research shows canine companions can improve cardiovascular health, lower cholesterol, and decrease blood pressure while offering support and a sense of calm that helps balance the emotional and psychological stresses of daily life. And whereas there are more than 500,000 service dogs in America working on behalf of their companions and their communities, more than 12% of the entire U.S. population and more than 10% of our Portsmouth residents cope with some type of disability on a daily basis. And whereas the City of Portsmouth recognized the profound impact that service dogs have on the lives of adults and children with disabilities, thanks to the unique ability to enhance the independence, mobility, and overall quality of life, opening doors for those they serve. Now, therefore, I, Dago McEachern, Mayor of the City of Portsmouth, on behalf of the members of the City Council and citizens of Portsmouth, do hereby proclaim September as National Service Dog Month in Portsmouth and call upon our residents and businesses to recognize and respect the important job service dogs do in helping us live up to our motto of the City of the Open Door. Given with my hand and the seal of the City of Portsmouth on this 17th day of August 2026. I would ask Brendan to say a few words. I'll just give you this first.
I would like to thank the mayor and councilors for making this proclamation. Having had my own service dog, I know the profound impact that these dogs make in people's lives. Jeffy, my first service dog, worked right up until the day he died. I hope that this proclamation encourages others to learn more about service dogs. Thank you again.
Thank you. Another round of a hand for Brendan here. Brendan is a true advocate, tireless, and make sure that we remember this day every month, every year. Continues to advocate for service dogs and to be recognized here in Portsmouth. Thank you again, Brendan, for your advocacy and for leading the charge on this. It's appreciated. So we have a few folks in pinstripes here today, and they had a remarkable season. I'm going to read a little bit, and I'm going to say a few words, and then we're going to honor our state champions here. The Portsmouth Little League put together a remarkable 2026 season that will be remembered as one of the most successful in Portsmouth baseball history. The team first captured the New Hampshire District 2 championship, defeating North Manchester Hooksett in the championship game. Building on that momentum, Portsmouth advanced to the state tournament and claimed the New Hampshire State Championship with a victory over Bedford in the final. The title marked Portsmouth's first Little League state championship since 2010. You guys gave it your all in the New England Regional Tournament in Bristol, playing against some pretty tough competition. Overall, with a record of 12-5, scored 167 runs while allowing only 55, and posted an impressive team batting average of 383. I don't even know if Rich could get something like that in Little League, but it's an honor to be able to read these words. It's also getting to watch you guys play this year. You had what you hope every kid has when you're a parent, and I'm speaking as like an old dad now, but life is not an easy thing. It's hard. It takes a lot of hard work. When you lost one of the toughest games against Bedford, it would have been super easy to pack it in. In fact, I think that's what Bedford was counting on you guys doing. The fact that you didn't is a testament to the grit that you guys demonstrate on there. And I know that it hurts, not winning the whole World Series. But when you look back on this moment, when you're a little bit older, you're going to realize that the not letting each other down, showing up for your teammates, the next man up, those are the lessons that are tougher to appreciate right now. But this city is incredibly proud of what you guys demonstrate, and you are, just an example to all of us of what hard work, working for one another, can lead to. So with that, I just want to read out, each one of your names. Bennett Smith, Ryder Raises, and let's clap as I do this in case Sam Carter, Drew Cresta, Tyler Hodges, Drayton Sumerskava, Brady Maloney, Jack Lair, Brian Poulin, Joey Coakley, Gabe Fournier, Christopher Foster, manager Charlie Raises, coaches Sam Cresta and Brett Graham. Hell of a job. All right, so we don't have keys to the city because with the city of the open door, it wouldn't make sense, but we do have door stops. So,
I cannot. It will not get me out of these docks. I do this. Just looking at it.
I would assume I have that much free time.
Say what?
I would assume I have a lot of free time.
It's not very clear.
Mayor McEachern and the rest of the City Council, thank you very much for having us and recognizing the boys tonight. So, yeah, just unbelievable season. I've said it a few times before, but I'll repeat myself. Like, started coaching Little League 6 years ago. Never would have imagined finishing out after my son Ryder was done this year the way we did. Winning a state championship and competing down in Bristol was just an awesome experience. So 16 years since we've done this here in Portsmouth, and I told them they're part of Portsmouth history now, and just something to be proud of, and echoing what you said, Mayor, that 20, 30 years from now when they're grown-ups, they're going to remember being state champions and playing in Bristol, and that's kind of what it's all about. So thank you very much.
You're here. Now, this is the awkward moment of the council meetings where, like, do I have to stay for the entire council meeting? You can stay for the entire council meeting, or you guys can go home right now. But if you don't leave right now, you're going to be here for the rest of it. So.
Hi, guys, thank you.
Good job, guys. Go Portsmouth.
Yeah.
So before we get to public comment, I'd wait a motion to suspend the rules on the resident first speaking order.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So it turns out the first person that did sign up is a Portsmouth resident, but Tyler Garzo. And we're just going to go down the list here. And again, it's typically 45 minutes. We'll take as long as we need. We are going to keep a 3-minute timer. If you go over the 3 minutes, we'll just, allow it to continue. But just 3 minutes is usually a good amount of time to say something and allows us to move through it. But we'll play it by ear. Tyler, you're up first.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. Tyler Garzo, 62 McKinley. I actually work for Shoals Marine Lab, which has docks next to the salt pile and runs a shuttle to the park and ride. I'll continue to support the RAP and the rate increase along with other taxpayers. But the 2025 parking study says some interesting things about the downtown worker parking program. Quote, there will not be available capacity to continue to support this program in the next 12 to 24 months. Much of tonight's earlier discussion focused on fitting more parkers downtown. When the study points the other way. Up to 75% of public parking is out-of-town discretionary trips, so the real pressure is visitors, not workers. This is the time to create alternatives in line with Council Goal number 2, a multimodal Portsmouth. The study says 10 to 15 minute service to a satellite lot like the Pease Park and Ride has significant and cited precedent in other cities. And there's a 2-year lead time before any sort of new garage. So this is the window now where we have to build real alternatives. Follow the study. The alternatives need to be ready now, and the rate increase being proposed should go directly to supporting those alternatives for workers and residents alike. Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler. Next is Margot Doring on parking/shuttle.
Thank you. Margot Doring, 300 Jones Avenue. On behalf of the 4 puppies that I've raised as guide dog puppy service dogs, thank you very much for your support for that program. Regarding parking, I have to say that I think I'm going to buy cervical collars for the entire city council because of the whiplash you must experience. Portsmouth wants a walkable city, but they want lots of parking at the same time, and I can't imagine how you have to juggle those competing demands. It seems to me that we have a lot of short-term solutions to a very, very long-term problem, and those short-term solutions are very difficult because the problem is a long-term one. I really support your effort to do a exhaustive study, an entire ecosystem study of the parking and the public transportation and other means of reducing the need for parking in Portsmouth. When I've been to cities that have successfully implemented walkability, the three things I notice are lots of public transportation, lots of walking and biking options, and an effort to try and make it possible for people to live without cars or with fewer cars. That includes things like Zipcar, other sorts of sharing systems. For the people who live in the south end of Portsmouth and need 2 cars, it must be impossible to try and figure out how to do that, particularly when you don't really have another alternative. If you had a car share situation, you might open up all sorts of possibilities for people. So I think your goal of having a study that's going to look at this holistically is really, really important, and I think it's important to do it as soon as possible, because it is going to take a long time to figure out, and it's going to take even longer to implement, not just in terms of figuring out what to do, but also to change people's mindsets, to change people's habits, to make people willing to give up that second car, or willing to walk a little bit further, or park in a parking garage. But I'm absolutely certain that if you build another parking garage, if you build more parking, you're just going to have more cars. And you're just going to face the same problem a little further down the road and a little further down the road. Let's take the resources that you would put into that, let's put it into the study, let's put it into some long-term solutions, let's put it into the public transportation system that is just begging for the opportunity to increase the frequency of its rides and its routes so that we can get more people on the system. One last thing I'll note, I actually went onto Google Maps, and if you want to walk around just about anywhere in Portsmouth, it will take you less than 10 minutes. From the parking garage at Foundry Place, from the remote lot at near the Masonic Temple, it's just 10 minutes into downtown, and we should really be encouraging people to get out and walk. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Margot. Next is Evie Summer Matter.
My name is Evie Summer Matter, and I have the great honor and responsibility of managing Ceres Bakery. I'm hoping to convince you all that the workforce parking program needs to be amended. Long before RAP went into effect, the issue of free parking availability came up in conversation amongst prospective staff and long-term staff alike. Of the 18 employees at Ceres, only 3 are Portsmouth residents. We commute from York, Kittery, Elliott, South Berwick, Somersworth, Dover, Wells, Exeter, Newmarket, Rochester, Seabrook, and Greenland. Between gas and tolls, it was never free to show up to work. The hope of a free parking spot was one of the only things that made the costly commute worth it. I have had stellar potential hires choose employment elsewhere with fewer barriers. I've had spectacular staff quit over the prohibitive nature of inconvenient parking. RAP fits the bill perfectly to appease residents. Unfortunately, this program undermines the efforts of small business owners who are fighting to retain staff in a highly competitive labor market. After having face-to-face conversations with hundreds of members of Portsmouth workforce, it is clear to me that we must strive for protected free workforce parking. The Portsmouth workforce has demonstrated a willingness to walk far distances for a free parking space. Currently, the majority of free parking is in residential neighborhoods. My prediction is that workforce will be pushed further into the neighborhoods, and then those residents will suffer the same inconveniences that South End residents dealt with for years. My hope is that you'll consider collaborating with business owners in an effort to reach a mutually equitable solution for both workforce and residents. Now more than ever, we must protect the workers who sacrifice so much to bring culture and community to this city. It would be devastating to see them leave.
Thank you, Evie. Justin Richardson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the City Council, Justin Richardson. I live at 586 Woodbury Avenue. I wanted to talk briefly about parking, just to give my perspective as a resident who's been here for about 11 years, on the Seacoast for, I guess, 26 now. I remember when the parking rates were raised because we wanted to move people into the new garage at the time, the Foundry. And it you know, I did some research on that. It drove me nuts because we were taking essentially what were free parking spots that were already paid for and then raising the rates on them in order to force people to change their behavior to go somewhere else. I think that was my recollection. I think all parking decisions have both good and bad consequences. The one thing that I think is the problem is that when we use the machinery of government to punish people or to influence behavior, I think that's a mistake. What I would like to see is you know, using parking fees. It's the wrong tool for the job. I think the only and best policy for this city council is to take government out of that business, make parking everywhere as easy and affordable, especially for the workers. I have a daughter who worked at Series Bakery for a long time. I really understand how that impacts them with the salaries that they have. Let people get to work, go downtown, buy groceries, and even visit for less. We shouldn't be using the parking fees because that takes people like me, and I don't go downtown anymore. I in the summertime especially, I drive to Kittery because it's just easier. You know, having to spend $3 for a parking pass. I know there's a resident program. I didn't get in it for about 5 years. I just think it's you know, the only policy and the best policy is just make it easy and affordable for everyone. Let people figure it out from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Justin. Buzz Scher on Flock.
I apologize for not expressing any opinions on parking. People have said plenty. At the very end of tonight's agenda is an item, a sample motion brought up by Councilor Bagley. I don't know whether he's going to continue to pursue that, but I wasn't sure whether there was going to be public comment then on that or whether now's the time. So three things actually. One, I've been working for the last 10 years on license plate readers in the legislature. In 2016, then Republican Representative Neil Kirk, who's a very strong privacy advocate, got passed a bill that put significant restrictions on uses of license plate readers, automated license plate readers. That bill had a sunset provision that it was to be repealed as of December 31st of this year. This past session, I was the prime sponsor at the behest of Representative Kirk to repeal the sunset provision. And so that statute is now permanent. It regulates automated license plate readers, and it does a very effective job. It has a lot of restrictions to it, particularly related to how long the agency doing the license plate reading can maintain that information that doesn't result in an arrest. We on House Criminal Justice, will be taking a look at that again this coming session to see it, given the advent of Flock, which is new in the last 5 years or so, whether we need to make any adjustments. But the way I read it now is it pretty much covers it and regulates it well. So I would ask the council to wait and see what we do in the legislature. Number two, a minor point, and not to provoke the council in any regard, but I think the council telling the police department what to do with license plate readers, which is within their purvey, is beyond the charter. It's the police commission's responsibility to make policy for the police department. We're more than willing to, talk with council members who want to talk to us about this. We will have a discussion about this at our next meeting. But I would ask the council to postpone any discussion, any resolution or conclusion about flock and how it would be done until the police commission meets and the legislature decides whether there's anything more that we want to do to really put strong limitations on flock.
Thank you, Buzz. Next, David, and just quickly on that, the motion before us is to schedule first reading on whether or not we would prevent flock from being adopted on city buildings and public lands here in the city of Portsmouth. That is, we'll go to second reading of the public comment if it passes tonight, so there will be much more time to speak out on whether folks do actually want the cameras in the city of Portsmouth. Next up is, sorry, what? That is what our motion is. It says that we're going to prevent them on city land. That's the motion that's before the council. So you guys are probably in agreement on that, but we will have the conversation and everybody can come back for the public hearing, which will be at the next council meeting if this gets scheduled.
This is just a schedule first.
Oh, schedule first reading, so 2 meetings. All right.
2 meetings.
I went against my rule of responding back, and here we are. So David Hanson on workforce parking.
Hey, my name is David Hanson. I live on Broad Street in Portsmouth. I was just here to talk about the workforce parking at the Foundry. I know there's like a 10-hour limit. I think it was mentioned earlier to increase it to 12. I would ask to increase that to maybe 15 or 16 because I know a lot of people that do work long hour shifts in the service industry. They show up at 8 a.m. and they're not getting to their car until like 11 p.m. midnight. So I would just like to ask to extend that time frame for those individuals. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Yeah, no, I got the, Penny, I'm going to get your last name wrong. Oh, okay. Hey, Penny, come on up. Penny Dreadful. All right.
So my name is Penny Dreadful, and I am the CEO of Pickwick's Mercantile, Fezziwig's Food and Fountain, and Debwick's Ethereal Emporium here in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And there are a couple of things. First of all, I want to stand behind what everyone else has said who is a business owner or a manager. It is very hard to get workforce into the city when there is no parking for them. We provide a vital resource for the city. We entertain and we enthrall and we bring people back to the city time and time again. And we're only able to do that if we have the right people in place to do so. And making it harder for people to find parking is going to make it harder for us to make that happen for Portsmouth. The guests that do come to see us, one of the other things that I'm hearing is that the parking is as expensive as it is in Boston. This is what I'm hearing from the visitors that are coming to see us. You can do that, but that's what the perception is of the guests who are visiting us. And the fees that they are getting if they overstay are very prohibitive as well. So that is for visitors as well as for people who are here. With any of these plans that go into place, there are two things that really stand out to me, having been here since 2013. We need to do something about how these sidewalks are cleared during the wintertime. You're talking about walking to parking garages. These city sidewalks are not walkable whenever we have a winter storm, so I would ask that that be addressed so that you actually can have people having a safe way to walk to work, because we don't have it. And then we just had all of the streets, not all of the streets, we just had State Street repaved. I don't know if anybody has gone and looked at the parking spaces and the lines that they painted, but we lost spaces. You can absolutely see it right in front of Fezziwigs, where there was one spot there, or where there were 2 spots or 3 spots, there's now 2. So someone should probably go back, take a look at that, and we need to get those repainted so you can get more parking spaces, so you can make more revenue. And I yield the rest of my minutes. I know you can't, but I do just want to stand behind everybody else who's been here and said it. It's hard to get workforce here. And I know that the residents need places to park as well, but we're not going to build a city if you don't have businesses to bring other people in. We are what makes Portsmouth special, and we are why people have chosen to come here and live here.
Thank you, Penny. Colin Schuller on Coast.
Hi, I'm Colin Schuller, Chauncey Street, Portsmouth. All of this parking conversation, it's all supply and demand. We have, frankly, a fixed supply, and we have ever increasing demand, and demand that now, really more than ever, has a higher personal cost associated with it. And that's what we're seeing here at these conversations. Our current system clearly needs some improvements, and we've heard a lot of good suggestions both from the people here as well as the council, and I think everyone's on the same page that improvements are needed. But it is important to remember what the intention of this program is and what the intention of, I think, what everyone wants here, which is that parking is available for those who need it. But since our supply is fixed, the only thing that we can do practically for a long-term lasting solution is to lower our demand. And that can really only be done with alternative means of transportation. Studies and the explorations are important, and I'm glad that we've started those, but again, we have a head start, and we have something that we can take advantage of in the meantime while we're waiting for those to get back to us. And we can do it in parallel. We have the Coast. We have a bus that currently does get a fine amount of funding, but it is operating at only a fraction of what it could do. It operates only on cash. It doesn't operate past 8 p.m. It operates once an hour, all things that if you really need an alternative, make it frankly useless. And it's not that far away from being extremely useful for a much larger number of people than it already is. Thanks.
Thank you, Colin. Jared Parker on parking.
Thank you, council members. I'm asking you to look at the parking issue not as a revenue issue, but as a workforce issue. Many people who work in downtown Portsmouth earn, $15 to $20 an hour. When parking costs $2 an hour, it is a significant portion of their daily income to come to work. Not only is it a small inconvenience, it directly affects whether the working in downtown is going to be financially stable. I go to work. Many of my coworkers can't even go to places like Series Bakery because they can't afford it. And now they are going to have to pay for parking. So we have a workforce that can actually contribute back into the revenue stream of other of these small businesses, but they can't afford it. And now we're going to be adding an additional tax to the people who are coming from very far away or even close by that they don't have parking. In addition to this, I also work at Strawberry Bank Museum, where we also have free parking for the members who come to visit our historical landmark. Unfortunately, what we're finding at the museum is that we have members people parking in our free lot because they know it's free. We take down, our site managers are taking down how many people are actually using our lot, but not using it for the museum. So we're losing money from the museum as well. In one instance, I saw someone coming and parking in we have 2 handicap spots, and they parked in our handicap spots. They take their chairs and they're going over to Prescott Park or going somewhere else besides the museum. I do understand that the city needs to manage parking and appreciate I'm sorry. Thank you for the Foundry. I know we do have, that is a program that is available to those of us that work in downtown Portsmouth. But quite frankly, sometimes it is too far. And as other members have spoken, in the wintertime, it can be a little bit dangerous, especially going on these sidewalks and not having a safe commute, walking commute to go all the way from the Foundry all the way to downtown Portsmouth. You know, I've been in the workforce here in Portsmouth since the 90s. I remember working at the Gap. All I had to do was show my badge, and I was able to get free parking over at Hanover Lot. And that's gone. Some of the opportunities that I have seen within parking within Portsmouth for over 30 years have come and gone. And this is just going in a negative trajectory for those of us who want to and contribute to Portsmouth's income and society. Thank you.
Hey, Jared. Moira Wright on parking.
Hi, Moira Wright. I grew up in Berwick, Maine, but I've been coming to Portsmouth since I was really, really young. I used to go to the library back when it was, you know, where the museum is now, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called, but I remember going there. I took my senior pictures in Prescott Park. I used to do ballet recitals at the music hall. I might not be a resident, but I feel really connected to this city, and I've went to UNH. I started working here probably my sophomore year, which was 2014 or something like that. I've worked all over town, and I've seen the parking diminish and dwindle. You know, this town is really special. I really do love it here. I think we've got a lot of great people who work here, who live here. And if it's a revenue issue, it doesn't make sense to me to get revenue from charging people for something they don't want to pay for, right? Why wouldn't we use that? You know, I feel like we should just create things in town that people want to pay for, and the employees and the residents here have a lot of great ideas. If you take a little bit of pressure off of them with parking, think about how much mental energy people have spent trying to find parking, arguing about parking. And they could be using that to create events or businesses that would be totally unique to Portsmouth that would draw people in. People would probably be willing to spend more money here and more money for parking if they can't go anywhere else to get the same experience. I'll also say right now I work at Read More Books and Brews. We've got a lot of tourists coming in. We have so many people who say, wow, I wish we had something like this in our town. I wish we had something like this in our state. It's, I remember Book and Bar. That was also great, but I don't know a lot of other places that have similar. I mean, there's Trident down in Boston, but that's something really special and really unique. And I just think that if we took pressure off of people, it would be beneficial to everyone. As for the Foundry Garage, I've served a lot of different restaurants in town since I was early 20s, 19. And honestly, sometimes you leave at midnight, at 1 a.m. You're walking back with cash. I had one boyfriend get me a taser. I had another boyfriend get me mace because they're worried about me walking back. I mean, forget the ice. It's not always that safe outside if you're walking around with a lot of cash. And I just think that, Portsmouth is so special and so unique. If we're able to put the money back into the people who live here and work here, we really will create something that makes people want to come and spend their money, their time, their energy here. But I guess that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Moira. So that is all I have for signups. Does anybody else want to speak? Certainly you can get, happy, come on up here.
I've said enough, I'm not as nervous. I just wanted to more or less ask a question or bring up for consideration the privately owned parking lots that we have in town. Yep. I have no idea what that business structure is as far as their relationship with you guys, but the banks that are located downtown that operate as like a privately owned parking lot after business hours, those fees are exorbitant. I guess I'm offering up for consideration, is there any way or an arrangement that can be made with those privately owned lots to open those up for workforce parking within certain business hours, not at the rate that they're asking now, but if these are businesses that are also a part of our ecosystem, bringing in some sort of arrangement where those spaces and those lots would be opened up for workforce parking, just to offer up some sort of solution towards this very large issue. And I feel like one thing I look at too is the federal building downtown, and that part, who owns that?
Anthony DiLorenzo.
Yeah. I feel like he's got enough cash in the bank. Maybe he would be willing to offer that up for free workforce parking. I just want to say that out loud. Again, I'm not sure, but that's a great opportunity, I think, that is available to ease this issue.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kelsey.
Thank you, Kelsey. Okay, yeah.
I just wanted to present one other idea, since I know everyone's talking about free parking, and obviously we are fighting for free workforce parking, but I think it has been proven that Park Mobile can allow for a discounted rate on Parrott Avenue, so I don't see why more streets, more metered spaces can't be made available at a discounted rate for the workforce.
Thank you, Nisa. Any other ideas, comments? Nobody? Okay, but I guess we'll go on to other parts of the agenda. One of them is on parking later. I just want to thank the folks that have come here for a couple reasons. One, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but this is why we're here. To listen and to try to incorporate as many ideas for as many people as we can. Two, this could have gone a lot of different ways, and it could have been a lot more angry than what folks came up and asked us to do. But you asked to be considered and to think about ways that we can improve the system that we have, understanding that there's a lot of parts to the system and a lot of pressures on the system. I don't think anybody was under the illusion that parking was a great situation in June. I mean, I think, Kelsey, you talked about the tickets, and there was a focus on trying to create a better system. And I want to recognize something that Councilor Blaylock said, and when he said it, I kind of was taken aback, but the mental health aspect of all of this. I think that there's opportunity to engage in a way that feels like this is a program that is putting you at, a priority in here. There's a lot of competing priorities in the city, but to be able to think at whatever program we end up with, that the workforce looks at it and says, this is an improvement over what we have, instead of this is a regression that one day is going to force me out of here completely. And so I just thank you for being here. This is certainly not the end of this, and when we make changes, we schedule changes so that people can come speak to for or against them. So those changes aren't going to happen tonight, but we are going to take the feedback that you have, and there's been a lot of feedback. One of the things we're going to start is just getting a feedback to the pilot, just generally so we can start tracking it, but to be able to make changes so at the end of the day, you feel as though, and by Portsmouth, that we have a program that's putting us on a better trajectory than the trajectory that we're on and have been on, I think, since the gap closed. And I don't know if that's the reason why, but that was, Portsmouth in the 90s was a beautiful thing. And, I think trying to get to a point where it feels as though it's a benefit and not a burden is what we're trying to accomplish. And I just want to thank everybody for being here this evening and being constructive, because we are a community. We are bigger than our borders. We know a lot of folks that have moved out of Portsmouth, and the goal is to try to create something that we feel all part of and all proud of. And so I appreciate the effort that was brought to tonight. stick around for the rest of the meeting if you want, but I just want to thank you guys for, and that was folks supporting the RAP and those that are supporting a better workforce parking program to come to the table and making the city better because of your input. So I know also it's not easy to do for 2 hours tonight that you were here, and so just thank you for spending your time with us to make Portsmouth better. It is appreciated. So with that, we're going to go on to the rest of the agenda. If you guys want to hang out, you can, but there's probably some other things you want to do too, so understand that.
Thanks for coming.
You're gonna miss the best part. They're missing all the good stuff.
There's a lot.
I miss 80s barbecue. Made me think of 80s barbecue. Remember the
80s?
smoke would come
Yeah.
out?
Yeah.
80 would come out and he'd be like, all right.
Yeah.
Now it's like, yeah.
I mean, things that I miss, you know, Club Spin. You know,
Yes.
Always
Hey,
trying to.
I
sneak
used
it
to
in.
hang out at Club Spin when I 30 years ago.
I'm only old
Bananas?
enough for I was
Bananas?
gonna say I'm only old enough for bananas, guys.
That's right. Yeah.
Hung out there too.
Yep.
Okay, so we do have public hearings and vote on ordinance and resolutions. We have a first reading, a couple of first readings here, to amend Chapter 7, or Chapter 10, zoning ordinances, Article 2, administration and enforcement, Section 10.234, procedures for variances, special exemptions, and appeals from decisions of the code official, Section 10.246, expiration and abandonment of approvals, and Section 10.1017- or .70, expiration and extension.
Move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading for September 14th, 2026.
Second.
Any further discussion, or any discussion on this? Councilor Moreau.
A lot of the administrative changes that we're making to this really have to do with trying to line certain things up, and it's really more of a cleanup than anything else. So we're not making any major changes, is what I'm trying to get at.
Okay, we'll take your word for it, and then we'll have the public hearing. Council Butler? All right. All right, so again, first reading, this will pass. We'll schedule second reading at the next city council meeting. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, we have first reading amendment, amending Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 3, Traffic Ordinances, Section 7.330A, no parking in Section 7.336A, one-way streets.
Your Honor, I move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading at the September 14th, 2026 City Council meeting regarding amendment to Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic, and Parking, Article 3, Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.330A, no parking, which will move parking spaces from the west to east side of Fleet Street as presented.
Second.
And
We got to talk about this one.
We vote and then.
Yeah, so.
I could speak to it briefly if.
Yeah, I have some questions. So yeah.
Councilor Hopkins thunder, but essentially, there's a lot of things happening on Fleet Street, and in order to make them happen, it makes a lot more sense to have the parking on the opposite side of the street of where it is now. So we're taking parking from the, I don't know if it's
West
north or
side,
south.
moving it side to
Yes,
side.
where the parking is now will now be on the other side of the street.
On Gillis.
And there's a bunch of reasons why that makes sense after all the reconfiguration of Fleet Street is done, and I think we can get into that a little bit with the one-way section.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Again,
No, I'll just say that these Fleet Street design changes have been run through Parking, Traffic, and Safety and the Bike Ped Committee, and both are in favor of this because it's going to create a more welcoming and amenable biking and walking ecosystem on there. So in order to do that, to improve safety for bikers, and we need to move the parking to the other side. And that's the reason, and it has support.
So in those, I guess the only question that I have, and it's maybe being sensitive on the topic here on parking, have we, we used to, there used to be outdoor dining on that street in Fleet Street, and then we said that that's not allowed because of the space and construction. And so I'm just wondering if these restaurants would have, I mean, they won't be able to have outdoor dining there if we move the cars to the other side, or the parked cars to the other side of the street. And I'm wondering, you know, if we had factored in for the times which they are actually, if they were to use that outdoor dining option to get walkability, if that would have incurred the same sort of danger and require it to move over to the other side of the street. Councilor Hopkins?
Yes, so the primary reason for moving the parking to the other side of the street is that with the one-way design, to have a contraflow bike lane, what we would be asking if parking remained where it was for people to park, to go through the bike lane to park their car, which is suboptimal at best. I'm not sure if, you know, there is sidewalk widening in this project too, and I'm not sure where that stands with, you know, outdoor dining and sidewalks. I don't know what those rules and such are, but the sidewalk is going to be significantly widened in this spot. But yeah, I don't think that has been in all the times I've heard this explicitly brought up about outdoor dining in the street. So that's a great question.
Councilor Bagley?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I see Eric Eby is here, and he's quite knowledgeable on Fleet Street. I wasn't at the meeting where we improved the contraflow bike lane, so I made sure.
I don't think we've, at the PTS meeting?
No, the council meeting. Didn't we talk about it?
We talked about it, and we asked
Okay.
for two, this would be the meeting.
Second motion. So then,
Second reading.
and this will tie into everything. I was going to wait for the second motion, but I think maybe now's the right time to bring it up. I was generally opposed to the idea, and the reason is it's a very short section of town, and it doesn't fundamentally serve a major bicycle purpose, in my opinion. And having lived through the Middle Street bike lanes, my concern is for 2 blocks of bike lane, we may create a public backlash. I don't know if we will, but we might. However, when I watched the PTS meeting, Erica Wygonick, who's great expertise in all things parking, she had a concern about the 18-foot travel lane, which I think, and this is where I'm hoping Eric Eby will be helpful, is kind of a requirement of the fire department because they got to be able to get the ladder trucks to do ladder truck things to the tall buildings there if there's ever a fire.
That's the technical term, ladder truck things.
So my concern is I don't want to have an 18-foot wide one-way road because people will continuously try to turn down it the wrong way. I agree with Erica Wygonick on that. Like if we don't have something there that makes it hard for you to go the wrong way and the one way, it's going to be a problem because of the width of the lane. However, I think there's a lot more public benefit to some kind of bumped out sidewalk that could potentially allow for outdoor dining or something like that than a contraflow bike lane. What I'm unaware of is there a way to do that and still meet fire department requirements? And the thought process I have would be the sidewalks on Chestnut Street. So Chestnut Street is, I forget the technical term, but it doesn't have curbs. It has kind of like shared street or a Wooner. Yeah, it has a colored delineation of where the sidewalk is, and the reason it works there is it's relatively low traffic. I think Fleet Street's going to be relatively low traffic with the one-way configuration. So those are my thoughts. But I do worry about the fallout when the public sees the contraflow lane. There's going to be a lot of pushback, and having lived through the Middle Street bike lanes, I don't know if the benefit is worth the pushback.
Well, okay, Councilor Hopkins.
Well, I would just ask, because Eric, I believe we have that data on bike usage on Fleet Street. So if that would help inform decisions, would you please share some of the data on numbers and perhaps also, you know, because yes, a change is going to be difficult to change habits on people driving the wrong way on Fleet Street. So at PTS, you know, we've discussed putting up, you know, a barrier, a temporary barrier to really like show people, no, you may not enter here. But I would ask Eric to speak more to those things.
We certainly can. This is first reading though, so we can have it as a presentation. But Eric, why don't you inform us if you can on this right now? Certainly.
Yes, prior to our PTS meeting, we put a traffic camera out on Fleet Street, which recorded all activity on the street. It was a 2-week period in July, and what we saw on average was about 2 bicycles an hour going that way down Fleet Street from Hanover to Congress. The highest usage we saw was 9 bicycles in 1 hour, and the highest usage in one day was 50 bicycles. It's on average about 25 bikes a day going from Hanover to Congress in that direction on Fleet Street. So,
Is that, just for context, how many cars were there?
peak hour on Fleet Street, there's 100 cars in each direction, 200 cars total on Fleet Street.
Okay. And then for other parts of the city, is that comparable, high, low for bikes?
It's probably low. I mean, it depends on what street you pick. I mean, Middle Street gets more usage than that. We don't have bike counts on every street, but it's low for vehicle counts. I know that.
Okay. Thank you, Eric.
Yep.
Other questions for Eric or comments? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. As someone who uses Fleet Street as my crosstown street, because when you live in the South End, there's not an easy way around downtown. You either go to one end or the other, but Fleet Street provides that crosstown back and forth. I think that's going to be the biggest challenge for people, is that suddenly they can't go back crosstown from Hanover. You can't get to the South End or to the library or to Town Hall coming across Fleet that way. In fact, you have to go to the end of the street and go around, and you have to loop around, which sometimes takes a little bit longer. So I think that's going to be the biggest adjustment. But I personally, as somebody who uses Fleet Street both ways a lot, I think it's worth it. And I think the change is worth it because we need the wider sidewalks in this space. And so I look at it as we're gaining a huge benefit on Fleet by having that expansion of sidewalks. We're not just gaining larger sidewalks, we're gaining some greenery, potentially some trees, I'm hoping, in this space. But I think that the bike lane is also important for bike traffic, and the cars have other routes that are really easy to access around town, even though it can be frustrating to have to go around. We don't have a good access point for bicycles where they're not in the flow of traffic. So this provides that access to Congress.
Thank you, Councilor Cook. I guess the idea of not doing something because of pushback is a fair one. I think it's more, if I just refine that a little bit, it's somewhat difficult sometimes when we do things and this is going to be a huge change. Like the Fleet Street change is going to be monumental for folks, and when we do it, it's going to be immense. And we'll go through and we'll find through the public hearing process, and it's likely based on what we've seen, especially the changes on Congress Street, it will make more sense long term. Don't think it's going to be up there, in changes of like Market Square, but it will make more sense, long term, and it's been fully vetted, and a lot of input over the years has put into that. The only thing on the bike lane, and I would just ask folks to think about this, and for us, for people that are part of SABRE to come and speak to, or others, is what is it connecting it to? Because the big takeaway that I found in the Middle Street bike lane part of my life was that there wasn't enough people outside of people that wanted to speak for kind of bicycling in general to come and speak and say, this is something that I use on a daily basis, and if you take it away, it will impact me X. It was more or less, we have to invest in bike infrastructure, and I always think the best way to do that is to connect two neighborhoods or two parts of town completely, fully, before, so that people will actually miss if it's taken away, and not just bike enthusiasts, which I certainly love and respect their efforts to push Portsmouth in a direction that will make biking easier. But we need more than those people to show up. We need the people that are going to be negatively impacted if we don't actually move the bike lane. So, I'll support this in terms of, the first reading. I really think the counterflow, conversation is going to be one that will have more pushback, and it runs the risk of being tied up into a person that will have watched none of these meetings will say that we closed off the street so that we can do a reverse bike lane on the other side of the street. And that's not the actual answer, but that's what this change will end up having in people's minds, because they can't, it's difficult to, be as attentive as we're forced to be, and they'll just kind of look at it. So that's one. And I guess the other point, we've changed parking on the other side. Like, we've never made parking decisions or traffic decisions based on outdoor dining. We're not going to start now, but we have had in the past moved parking to the other side of the street if, I think on Massimo's, or Ceres, where it made sense. We just took away parking from one side and moved it to the other. So it's something that we could bring back here if there was a desire. But I do just have some concerns on the counterflow, only because it doesn't necessarily connect 2 points as well as maybe it could. I'll go Councillor Hopkins and then Councillor Bagley.
I would say that, the counterflow bike lane has been identified as a connector through downtown, somewhat how Councillor Cook was talking. So it is, because it is a quieter street, it's a smaller street. So to the bike community, what I've heard through the Bike and Pedestrian Committee is that this is a connector from one side of town to the other. The other thing I'll say too is, if we make it one way and we're worried about the wide street inviting folks to come down the wrong way, a bike lane with not just a single, regular like 2 stripes, but you can make like a 1 to 2 foot like stripe with cross across, really to it's a certain pavement treatment that you can do that really like delineates this is a bike lane and this is the travel lane. Those are ways where you can not restrict pavement space so that fire trucks can still operate, but still create visual, awareness of this is one way and the bikes go here. Parking, again, having parking on the other side of a bike lane makes no sense to me. And the other thing too that I would push back on the hypothetical of, we're always going to hear negative opinions. I'm not saying that we won't, but if part of our commitment to the climate action plan, our commitment to multimodal, our commitment to decrease parking means that we are going to make changes to improve bike infrastructure. I think they need to be visible as part of this plan. On Congress Street, bikes will have their own separate traffic light. So again, there's a difference between, and I just thought this weekend, I went to a memorial service where, we were in a church that had kids' toys out in the back. And that to me says we expect kids to come here and be in this space. When there's bike lanes that are, clearly marked, they have their own traffic signal, we're saying we expect bikers to be in this downtown. And, if we want a walkable downtown core, this is downtown core. So if we want something that is better for bikers and walkers, we are going to have to shift parking and restrict cars, or restrict traffic flow cars to just one way in order to actually take the action. I just don't think that the backlash is worth it on this. I wasn't here for Middle Street, and I think I'm happy about that, but this is something, again, that's well supported by the Bike and Pedestrian Committee, who is made up of more than just, gung-ho cyclists. Like, I am not a gung-ho cyclist, but I would want this to take my kid downtown to, honestly, to get to the library. This is how, personally, I would come. I would rather do this than, coming down further or going through that worst intersection in Portsmouth where it's all crosswalks. So I am thoroughly in support of these initiatives.
Just for the record, the worst intersection is the Bartlett Bridge, K Street. It's just,
All right,
I want that to be, doing the best
On the
of what we
record,
got there.
second worst
but,
intersection.
Councillor Bagley.
Thanks, Aaron. And when I talk about pushback, it's not because I think people will be mad at me. I think I do a pretty good job of that already without having to worry about that. It's when we get pushback on Middle Street bike lanes, it really retards the chance to have future discussions about bike lanes elsewhere in the city. It's not we shouldn't do something because of pushback. We should be very thoughtful that the community feels like they got value for the changes, so they're supportive of more and future changes. And, thinking about this more, and I can't remember, I know we did the QR codes, we got a lot of public comment 2 or 3 years ago, and everything got delayed because we had to do sewer pipes downstream before we could do this. I feel like the Contra bike lane was thrown in kind of in the last 6 months or something. It wasn't originally, or do I have that wrong? I don't remember.
What we could do is add that to the presentation at second reading.
It wasn't a part of the original proposal. It came in as a part of the recent conversations as a request of, I believe, the Bike Ped working committee or working group.
And, during my time on PTS, I was always hesitant about a committee like that was focused on one core group in the city, because it can sometimes drive things that have support in the room, but not necessarily as a broad base. But what stuck out to me is, and I don't know if we have counts on pedestrians, but we have 100 cars each way, 2 bikes each way per hour on average. We probably have at least 100 pedestrians. And we have an opportunity to make, especially if the what happens to Ladd Street actually goes through, that could be a very, very pedestrian heavy area. And to me, to be giving up sidewalk space for 2 bikes an hour, if there's a way we can incorporate the really wide sidewalks and the fire trucks, to me, that would be the highest and best use of that street. And I know we're not making decisions tonight, but I thought it was good to get that idea out there to see if it has any support.
I think Councilor Bagley, and I think everybody's saying, or reasonably the same thing. I think Councilor Flynn or Councilor Hopkins makes some points that are certainly useful in terms of this is a thoroughfare and being able to have bikes on there. I think the question, that I have, and we will see on the public comment at the public hearing, that's why we get it, is to see how much feeling is this is a connector there, because the point that we, and no scar tissue, Councilor Hopkins, you are, on the Middle Street bike lane, but we ended up just fighting about bike lanes that, were on the other side of traffic, that were like very hard to get to. And then, we tried to make, some modifications, and they just made nobody happy and kind of pushed us and retarded that program for a while, because it was, such a, the bollards just became such a blowback, issue. So we'll have well, first we have this motion here, and then we have to, wait, what is, hold on, we have the first reading and then another one on, it's not an amendment, oh, it's two different ones that have the same thing, okay, that we have to do. Okay, so the motion on the floor is to move the parking to the other side of the street, as presented.
And I think I made the motion, Councilor Moreau seconded it.
Yep, and this is for first reading to get to second reading to hear from the public. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Second is, second portion of that.
Your Honor, I move to pass first reading and schedule a public hearing and second reading at the September 14th, 2026 City Council meeting regarding an amendment to Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic and Parking, Article 3, Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.336A, One-Way Streets, changing Flea Street to one-way from Congress Street to Hanover Street as presented.
Second.
And I kind of said all my thoughts on that on the previous one.
Yep, and again, this is to put it to second reading in the public comment. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, public hearing and second reading of the annual omnibus ordinance amending Chapter 7, Vehicles, Traffic and Parking, Article 3, Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.326A, Limited Parking, 15 minutes, Section 7.330A, No Parking, and Article 6, Loading Zone, Section 7.601, Limited Hours Loading Zone.
Your Honor, we have City Engineer for Parking, Transportation, and Planning, Eric Eby, who has a couple of slides to walk through.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, City Councilors, this is the annual omnibus, which covers the changes made by Parking Traffic Safety Committee over the past year that affect ordinances in Chapter 7. We have 3 of them tonight. The first one is on 15-minute parking spaces, and that is on Daniel Street. And these are the 2 spaces in front of Moe's Sub Shop. And what happened was those 2 spaces were put into place, and the 3 existing spaces on the other side of Daniel Street were returned to regular Zone A parking spaces. This change was actually implemented back in 22 to 23 but didn't make it into the omnibus until then. So we brought it back to the PTS this year for reapproval so that we can get it onto the omnibus now. But these spaces have been in place for at least 3 years now, so it's been well tried and successful. The second slide shows the parking space on Middle Street that was removed at the intersection of Cass Street. This was to open up sight lines at the intersection of Cass and Middle for vehicles pulling out of Cass Street. The original request from some residents was to remove 2-3 spaces at this location. PTS approved the removal of 1 space. That was approved back in October of 24, but it didn't get in place until 25, and part of the condition was to monitor it to see how it went, and that brought us past the omnibus for last year. So it was reapproved again for another 1-year trial, and that's why it's on the omnibus now, but it's been 1 space has been removed now for over a year, and it's been going well. And the last item is loading zones, and this one is on Brewster Street. This one was approved in May of 2025. However, at the time, the Islington Street project was still under construction, so we weren't able to stripe it or put the loading zone sign in place until after the omnibus deadline had passed for last year. So we brought it back to PTS again. They reapproved it in October, and it's back now for approval. This is requested by the restaurants there at the corner. It allows a parking space next to, closest to Islington, and then a loading zone after that. And what it did was change the hours of the loading zone so that it would be more available to their customers of the restaurants during hours. And so it's been working out well for them. It's been, the sign has been in place, and it's going to be restriped again. So these actions have all been in place now for upwards of a year, at least.
Your Honor, I move to pass second reading of annual omnibus ordinance amending Chapter 7 Vehicles, Traffic and Parking, Article 3 Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.326A, Limited Parking 15 minutes, Section 7.330A, No Parking, and Article 6 Loading Zones, Section 7.601, Limited Hours Loading Zone, and schedule the third reading at September 14th, 2026 City Council meeting.
Second that, but we need a public hearing.
Yeah, we'll have a public hearing, yeah. But we can have questions of Eric before the public hearing as well, since I don't see, maybe Sue, but go ahead, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Has there been anyone come in and ask for additional spaces now to be removed at that intersection of Cass and Middle? I know that the visibility is not ideal there.
No, but yes, there was someone at PTS last month meeting. They've concerns about the intersection of Cass and Chevrolet at Lovell, as well as Middle at Cass. It's unless you take away a lot of parking spaces there, you're not going to have full sight lines that you should have. But the committee tried to reach a compromise to remove 1 parking space to improve it, and we did monitor it with cameras afterwards and saw that it was working better, where vehicles didn't have to pull way out into traffic to see what was coming. They were able to stay back a little bit further.
Thank you. And I just wanted to note this Brewster Street loading zone is important, and it's one of the areas that I think has become a little more challenging with the wrap, with people trying to park there.
Councilor Bagley.
Thanks, Aaron. Just a note on Cass. It would have been nice if we could have gotten 1 more space removed, but like anything else, we compromise. But what's really nice is when they repaved Middle, there's now like a bump out that prevents you from parking, and that parking space that's no longer there was the one that caused, I think, the dangerous intersection by far. And now that you physically can't park there, I think we're going to have pretty good compliance.
Councilor Bagley. Eric, just had a quick question on this, just on the one that's the 15-minute. I know we've already done that, but we made, that it's been there, but there was a space or 2 that was leading up to the crosswalk there that was deleted. Did we already pass that? Does this was that separate from this?
I'm not sure where exactly if you have that graphic.
Sorry, yeah, Daniel coming into Market Square, there used to be a parking spot just above, there's a parking spot ahead of the crosswalk, and then it's removed as a no parking zone. I'm just curious on if that was.
Is this on New Daniel heading into Market? It's on the left side of the road?
Yeah.
Yeah, there had been 15-minute spaces there. There was a alleyway as well where there was no parking and a temporary crosswalk during construction.
No, I'm actually talking about just right in front of Napolitano, right there. So, nope, sorry, right there. Yeah, that one. Again, I thought this was all in the same time horizon. I'm just wondering why that's where we deleted that one, because it does seem, it's like 25 feet from the crosswalk, and I'm just wondering, is that something that I don't recall that coming to the vote, and I thought this was on the same one to put that in the omnibus. So I'm just curious if that's something you can speak to.
Yeah, I don't recall that unless it was one that was removed because it was too close to the crosswalk. If you park, you're not supposed to park right up to the edge of a crosswalk. You have to give it at least 20 feet, 30 feet at a stop sign. That may have been why it was removed. I don't recall it coming to PTS for approval of that.
Yeah, okay. Are you, I guess.
We can look into that and report back, but I don't recall removing that parking space as a measure.
Well, we did remove it. I do remember, because you can still, like on Google Maps, you can still see where the line was before.
Yeah. I know we did shift things around. That alleyway between the Brick Market, where you can see the gap there in front of those colored spaces, that is now a parking space. So we did shift things around in order to get more parking in that area. That gap doesn't exist anymore. There is a parking space there. So.
Okay, maybe just a flag. This doesn't affect that, but would love to know if we can put that parking space back in there, and what because it seems like there's room to the crosswalk, maybe not or just the actual crosswalk, not the white line that's before the crosswalk, but the actual crosswalk. Councilor Bagley, do you remember that one?
No, but I remember walking downtown like a week ago and be like, oh, it looks like we lost a space. But it could be that when we gained more spaces further down, we had like an orphan chunk of land, and what used to be big enough isn't anymore for a space in that particular location. But I thought it might be a good time. We've gotten a number of emails and a number of, I think we even got like a letter from a downtown worker who lives elsewhere that is convinced that we can gain back like 250 parking spaces downtown by not listening to setbacks. And if you walk downtown on State Street or Court Street or Pleasant, you'll see that the parking spaces oftentimes go very close to the intersection of the stop sign, because we've looked, so the 20-foot rule and the 15-foot rules are kind of general guidelines for the city. But in parking intensive areas where the speeds are quite slow, we can kind of adjust accordingly, or we haven't taken away those parking spots proactively. But the letter isn't really factually correct in the sense that a lot of those intersections, we go right up to or very close to the intersection with parking in a way that we wouldn't if it was like a more rural, non-downtown street. And I didn't know if you could speak to that, Eric, or about how we look at some intersections in the city very individually, but then we have a general rule for everywhere else.
Yeah, well, there is state law and city ordinance that when you're at an intersection with a stop sign, you must be 30 feet back from the stop line at that intersection to provide room for turning movements. And when there's not a stop sign, you must be 20 feet from the crosswalk at an intersection. And that 20 feet, if there's no crosswalk, then it's measured from the curb line of the side street. So when you have a radius involved, sometimes it can look like you're closer to that side street than you really are, but it's always a minimum of 20 feet that we must stay back from an intersection. And I think that letter that we received was asking us to allow parking within that 20-foot area, because 20 feet's the length of a car, on average.
Is there anything that prevents us from, like, what's the governing authority on making a change and put cars before 20 feet?
Well, the primary reason is for safety, because when you park so close to an intersection, then you can't see, it blocks your sight lines coming out of the side street. And so that's why the reason for the state law and the city ordinance prohibiting parking within 20 feet.
So it's a state law?
State law, yep, 20 and 30 at a stop sign, and as well as the city ordinance for 20.
Okay. I guess just the areas of which it's rather congested and folks go, somewhat slower. It'd be nice to know, where those are, or if that law has changed, because I'm looking at the space that I was mentioning earlier, and it wasn't moved back at all. It was simply the line. It used to go up and then diagonal, and now it just the diagonal of the no parking starts faster. So I'd be interested to know if that was something that we had previously that didn't comply with state law, because I imagine there's some parts of our town that don't comply with state law because they're older than the state law, they're before the cars were theirs and the streets were built. So it would be good to know about any of those areas where we could ask for a dispensation from the state to, and is that a process that we can, because I know we have speed limits that are lower than 25 miles an hour, and we have to ask to do that. So if there's, any way that we could put a report together to see if we could add parking and request a waiver of the state there, is that a process that we could go through for additional parking?
I don't think you really have to ask permission from the state. It's more of a, it's a safety feature. It's why parking is prohibited from an intersection. If you could, we allow parking right up to edges of driveways because not a lot of traffic comes out of a driveway, and they'll have to just deal with that occasionally. But when you're dealing with a public street, you want to make sure you have safe sight lines for coming out of a street.
Certainly,
minimum.
and that's the reason why we're making that change on Cass, because there wasn't the sight lines that are there, and we're removing parking, and that makes all the sense in the world. I'm just asking in terms of looking at the downtown, given the speed of which cars are traveling in the downtown, if the same alignment for Cass Street and the decisions we're making there would have a different view when the cars are inherently going somewhat slower because of the traffic that exists there. But we'll take that up in a separate motion or separate report back request. Oh, Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to point out that this intersection on that side in particular, a car that's parked there would not be blocking any sight line because there is not a road that is approaching Daniel right there because of Market Square, because there's a large bump out there for the Market Square seating area. So you are at least 20 feet off Pleasant Street there on that side. So I don't know, if we moved it because we're close to an intersection, it doesn't impact sightlines on that side, and the intersection isn't on that side. It's on the other side of the street where we do have a bump out that prevents additional parking. So I think it's a reasonable idea to look at that again and see if it's feasible to add that parking spot back.
Yeah, because that 20-foot rule applies to side streets, intersections, as well as crosswalks. And I think the reason is it's a crosswalk distance is why it's there. Because when you have a vehicle parked right up to the edge of a crosswalk and a pedestrian walks out in front of that parked car, you're not seeing him until he's all of a sudden in traffic. So.
Councilor Bagley.
Your Honor, I might have inadvertently opened a can of worms, much like the 20-mile-per-hour speed limit that we have places that may not 100% be in compliance. I think we may have some parking spaces downtown that are not 100% in compliance, so I wouldn't want to do anything to trigger an audit.
I mean, I think Eric mentioned that we don't have to, it's not something that, I always guess unclear. Is the state going to make us change any of these things?
No, but it's a city ordinance that you can't have the parking close to an intersection. So you'd be going against a city ordinance if you allowed parking within 20 feet of an intersection.
Okay. Understandably but that's regardless of traffic speeds?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, is it possible to take a look at that from a standpoint of, do traffic speeds have any impact on the safety of the intersection and the requirement of 20 feet?
Oh, yes. I mean, the 20 feet is really insufficient for most speeds because the actual sight line is so short. If you have a car parked right up to the edge, your sight lines are extremely limited.
Okay.
And, a vehicle going more than a couple miles an hour, you wouldn't be able to see them or stop them.
Okay. Councilor Moreau.
Just to follow up with that, let's keep in mind you need that 20 feet to also be able to parallel park into a parking spot. So you're going to be pulling into a crosswalk if you're right on top of the crosswalk in order to get into the parking spot.
Before I get anybody kind of reaching out to me like, devil may care attitude when it comes to parking, This was a parking spot that used to exist, and then when we made the other changes that we're now approving right now, it went away, and it's not on the list of things that we are accepting as a part of the omnibus, and so I'm just trying to get to the bottom of where that parking spot change happened, and maybe it happened in another omnibus bill that we passed, but if it didn't, I just would like to know what the reasonings before it, because it lived there for, well, for as long as, I can recall, and now it's not there. And so I thought it was a part of this one. It's not, and I just want to figure out where it is.
Provide a
All right.
report back.
Excellent. All right.
We need to open and close a public hearing.
All right. Opening the public hearing. If anybody still wants to talk about parking as it is currently and not changing any of that right now. Seeing no one rise, no one on Zoom. Closing the public hearing. Now we will have any other additional council questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Your Honor, I'd like to suspend the rules and pass third and final reading.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I forget, do we have to do, did you
Suspend
say
the
to,
rules
and?
first?
Yeah, now we gotta do the
And?
motion.
Yeah, 'cause now you gotta.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the annual omnibus ordinance amending Chapter 7 Vehicles, Traffic, Parking, Article 3 Traffic Ordinance, Section 7.326A, Limited Parking, 15 minutes, Section 7.330A, No Parking, and Article 6 Loading Zones, Section 7.601, Limited Hours, Loading Zones, and Schedule and pass third and final reading.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Next, third and final reading of ordinance amendment to Chapter 12 Building Code, Section 1201 through 1209 by deleting and replacing the entire chapter.
Your Honor, I move to pass third and final reading of the amendment to Chapter 12 Building Code, Section 1201 through 1209 is presented. Second.
Biggest question, looking at Jane, did they accept, they accepted our changes? All right. Happy days. All right. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you, Shanti. You can turn us off now. Shanti's on Zoom.
All right, public hearing continued from August 3rd, 2026, a meeting to set parking fees for on-street and lot parking for FY '27, $3 per hour for the first 3 hours and $6 per hour thereafter pursuant to Chapter 1 Administrative Code, Article 16, Adoption of Fees, Section 1.1601, Procedure.
Your Honor, I move to set parking fees for on-street and lot parking for fiscal year 2027, $3 per hour for the first 3 hours and $6 per hour thereafter pursuant to Chapter 1 Administrative Code, Article 16, Adoption of Fees, Section 1.1601, Procedure.
We have the public hearing.
There was no
We need a
second.
second.
I'll second for discussion.
Second for discussion. Public hearing, we will, I guess we could always continue it if we, but we'll close the public hearing. Seeing no one rise and no one on Zoom. Any discussion on this after this evening?
We have someone.
Oh, you do? Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, Sue. All right, opening the public hearing.
You snuck back in.
You didn't see you come back.
Yeah, no, I'm Susan Sterry, Broad Street, Portsmouth. I've read articles in the newspaper and everything. Does this change the resident rate?
No.
So technically, or right now, it's going to be $1.25 for as long as I live here? No. So it changes nothing in that area. And was there a study done on this, raising it to 3 and then the 6, or, I mean, where did the figure come from? I'm just curious if that's possible.
The fee committee could speak to that, or Councilor Bagley?
Member of both. We raised the garage fees to $3 an hour, and we raised the garage monthly passes. Best parking practices is you're on street, you want the most turnover.
Right.
So it should never be priced lower than the garages, which it is currently because of the.
Oh, okay.
So we're raising it so that maintains its status as the highest value parking in the city.
Oh, okay. So in the future, like if we raise parking in the garages, the rate on streets will come up too, probably?
Presumably, it would be up to the council at the time, but that would be the best
Actually,
practices.
B committee now. B committee gets to do both of them now.
B committee or council.
Right, which is approved by council. So, but yeah, best practices is your on-street should always be your highest cost parking.
Right.
So in theory, if in the future another council wanted to raise fees or prices, the street parking would always be the highest number.
Gotcha. And my one last question, how would this affect, or does it affect, with all the discussion going on about workforce parking downtown for service people?
The wrap would remain the same, but if a service worker who is not a resident parked in a parking spot in Market Square, they would have a higher price because everybody that is not a resident now has a higher price in Market Square, for instance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Apologies for closing the public hearing early. Now we'll close it. Councillor Bagley.
All right, so Your Honor, I still have yet to have anybody give me any feedback on this change whatsoever other than what we could do with the money, but not the actual change in pricing. I do think this is an opportunity. I was looking at the signs today. They have the pricing on the sign. There's been some talk that maybe the workforce parking should be included in some of the signs, or that maybe there's different verbiage we could use on the sign. I'm guessing we'll probably just put a sticker over the $2 to say $3 in the short term. But this could be a good opportunity to get signs that are a little clearer. And I don't know what that means exactly, but if we're going to be changing a bunch of signs, let's not do it twice if we don't have to.
Understood.
Councillor Blaylock.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm going to vote against this at this time. I just think this is not the right time to be adding on. I just feel like we've really, I don't know. We have just kind of, put a twister over Portsmouth parking and really affected everyone's mental health and everything like that. And I'm not worried about dollars and cents right now. I'm worried about taking care of our people of our community. So I'll be voting against this at this time.
Thanks, Councillor Blaylock. Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. So I want to know how quickly and what we would need to do to change the workforce designation so that more people qualify for the workforce parking program. And the reason I'm asking that is that we received several emails from people who are saying they're spending $20 a day parking. And that tells me that they're not using the workforce program. And so I want to make sure that our workforce isn't negatively impacted by this increase in rates. And I think the best way to do that is to make sure that more people can actually enroll in the workforce parking program. And so I just want to know how quickly can we effectuate that change, because it's not really written down anywhere in ordinance or anything how that is administered.
Your Honor, I think it would be fair to provide all that information in a report back at the next meeting.
Okay. Other questions or comments? Councillor Blaylock.
Could that report back just include if the Foundry Garage is filling up and when it is filling up? Because I have heard that the supply we've provided for downtown worker parking is sometimes not available.
Fair point. I think one of the points that was made or one of the requests was to be able to have more areas included in the downtown worker parker program. That's if they're full, then obviously $3 is a lot more to pay there. The issue that we're facing at the moment is the garages are. We changed the garage before we changed the downtown worker parker, so the garages are now more expensive than the street parking, the inverse of where we want to be.
I understand the current situation. I just don't want to add anything else to, one of our most sensitive community members. These people are just trying to make ends meet, and we're just here's another, not right now. If anything, I'd go back and let's go back and change the garage and lower that. You know what I mean? Let's go in that direction. Let's not keep climbing up this mountain that, people are urging us not to climb up. I just feel like we should maybe pause and listen, maybe, and try to, instead of just jumping forward, but that's just me.
Councilor Boylock, any other questions or comments? Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. So what I think is critical is, I do understand the issue with the garage being priced higher than on-street parking, and that absolutely should not be the case. It goes against our parking principles. It goes against all of our planning and the way that we administer parking programs within the city. However, we have to be able to move quickly on fixes for the workforce if they're having challenges with regard to parking. And that means our next meeting isn't until middle of September. So if we make this change, that's a month of an additional $1 an hour parking, and then an escalation to $6 an hour, which is an additional $1 more than they were paying for on-street parking if they have to park in the downtown zone. So if we're waiting for a report back in September, that means there's no action on that until at least probably October. And so I'm concerned about that kind of timing.
We could schedule another meeting.
Your Honor, I have a potential modification. Perhaps a counselor could bring forth a request to modify the existing policy for the Downtown Worker Program to specify the expansion of the workforce program to include different folks, salaried versus otherwise. So if that helps your line of thinking.
Assistant Mayor?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think to express my opinion, piggybacking off my fellow two counselors, the concern is that we know that whether it is positive or negative, we know that downtown workers are parking on the street. And so I think part of the issue is that, as Councilor Blake said, Foundry does fill up. We've seen it several times over the summer that it's full between the downtown Parker program, between regular tourists, between renters, between pass holders, which is great. I mean, a couple of years ago, I think nobody thought Boundary would ever fill up. But, I sympathize with the fact that we're making this change, and we know that there are people and downtown employees and workers that park on the street. So while we won't have a solution, as Councilor Cook said, or we won't really have any update about the RAP program until October. That is where I struggle to vote yes for this, understanding the logic of, that we want them all to be the same rate. But it feels like it came backwards. And now it feels like we're having to do this because we have to do it. But yeah, I think, again, the acknowledgement that not everyone uses the workforce program. There's not always enough room for people in the work program. And some people come in at 5 o'clock at night to a shift, and they are running late and they park on the street. And I understand that the goal is turnover and turnover and turnover. That is the whole point of paid parking, but that's not always the reality of the paid parking.
Agreed. And I think, so just really one quick point on the mechanisms of this. So 4-hour stay is cheaper on the street than a garage. A 5-hour stay would be more expensive on the street than the garage, right? Because it goes to $5. So, I mean, at the end of the day, like, it's kind of on the margin at the moment here. But Councilor Hopkins and then Councilor Bagley.
So while I do hear the workforce's concerns, and I do agree with the sentiment that this is a lot all at once. If we don't change this, then we're going to run out of street inventory. It does take that time, so then we're going to have tourists parking where we don't want them to park. So the parking behavior patterns would shift in an unfavorable way. And, that arguably could cause workforce folks to just not find a spot and have to circle, should the parking on street continue to be cheaper than in the garage?
I think with, oh, sorry.
Councillor Bagley, and then go back to the Assistant Mayor.
I think I'm going to vote in support tonight for a couple of reasons. The first is we're in the middle of a data collection exercise. Yes, this did come at the tail end of all the other changes, but procedurally it had to. There was no choice. We're in the middle of the summer season. This is when we want to collect the data on what this pricing change happens. Two other things are going to happen. One, with the increase in pricing, I think we're going to see a lot more residents sign up than we have previously, which I think is a great thing, because all residents should be in this program. And we're going to see more workers sign up, and we're going to get to see what the pressures are, and do those spare spots on Parrott Avenue go away? Do we need to do something with the Parrott Avenue lot? And then I'll push back a little bit, and this will make me incredibly unpopular, but we've got storefronts downtown that are renting for $9,000, $10,000, $11,000 a month, and all that money goes to the landlord. Why is it that the Portsmouth taxpayer who never goes downtown has to supply parking for that landlord? Why is it the system that the city is beholden to provide parking for employees that work at a t-shirt company? Shouldn't that come from the t-shirt company and the landlord of the t-shirt company? I mean, we're talking about 30 cents an hour, which a 50-cent an hour bump in pay would support the parking cost. Now, there's a lot of arguments to be made, but there's a lot of economic vitality in this town that's not downtown. We have the trade port. We have all the companies out on Route 1. We have all the companies out towards Market Basket. We've got a lot of commercial and office businesses in this town that provide their own parking lots. And they pay for those parking lots. They pay property taxes on those parking lots. They pay to have them plowed. They pay to have them lit. Downtown, if you own a building, in a lot of cases, you don't pay any of the parking overhead. And I think it's unreasonable to expect that Portsmouth residents bear 100% of that burden. And if a landlord can only get $8,000 a month for his downtown storefront instead of $10,000 a month, I think that's actually a good thing. And we're going to see a return of downtown resident-focused businesses. And it's painful, but it has to be said, if we want to go down this road of just tourism and we keep our residents from the downtown, I don't think that's a good path. We've gotten a number of emails from residents. We had residents reach out. Some come tonight. I go downtown more now because I can find parking. Don't we want a downtown that the people that live here want to visit? Isn't that like a good thing?
Councillor or
Yeah.
Assistant Mayor, and then
Hey, Councillor, I'm fine. Councillor Freckly, I would say that nobody's arguing against that this council has very vocally tried to bring residents back downtown. I would argue that that same argument of a property owner could be argued against the South End to say you bought your house with one parking spot. Why should your neighbors over in Elwyn Park be responsible to make sure that you have more parking? I also think we have to make sure that we're categorizing downtown property owners and businesses very differently. We heard tonight that there are, employees of much larger companies like Novacure using the downtown Parkers program, which I'm okay with. But, we are in this discussion comparing a small business who the majority of the small businesses downtown don't own their property. They're renters. And so by saying, it's not our responsibility, it's the landlord's responsibility, well, we've seen what happens. The landlords are using private companies to monetize those lots more. When it used to be, you would show up for your 5 o'clock shift, you'd be 5 minutes late because you'd be parking at a bank. Now that bank, that bigger corporate company, is monetizing in a way that the little people, even if they own the property, cannot monetize the same way. So I think we have to be careful about when we're doing the generalizations of, well, a downtown landlord. As a former tenant, we were lucky enough to be able to buy a small space, but we were one of those businesses paying $8,500 to $9,000 a month for a commercial lease with no help or no parking or no anything. So, and my landlord was banking all that money. So the question is, if we're going to say the onus falls on somebody, how do you then it's a trickle down. You're then putting the onus on the small business that is locally owned. We are seeing a higher concentration of larger corporate companies coming in, retailers coming in, because they can foot that bill. So when we talk about wanting to bring more local downtown centric businesses, those are the little ones that are owned by the mom and pops that live here, the Gus and Rubies, you know what I mean, the Series, the Cali Bees, that don't, the majority of the time, don't own their buildings. And so if we want more of those and less of, no offense to them, but less of fat faces or the sheep overload or these larger corporations, then we have to do something. So I just think we have to make sure that we're very careful when we talk about like a landlord's getting. Well, what a landlord is getting and what profit that small business is making are big deltas.
Thanks, Assistant Mayor. Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. We actually, the history reports, we used to actually make businesses pay for the spaces in front of their business, so that businesses used to not move ever. I remember talking to the owners of the, Russell T. Hammer, and then one of the best things we did was remove that fee, so that it allowed small businesses to open up without this extra cost. And downtown has been built by these small businesses, by these restaurants. I mean, back in the 70s, it wasn't a place you wanted to go. You wouldn't let your kids go down there. We used to have to walk our waitresses back to their cars because girls were getting murdered in the 80s. Like, I don't know if you understand how they've contributed to our community. I mean, it takes a village. It takes all of us. But they're part of it.
Thank you, Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. So what I'm really struggling with is
Oh,
that
sorry. I said this in. All right, go ahead.
Several of the individuals who were here tonight have told me that they are not part of the workforce parking program. And the reason they're not part of the workforce parking program is they work full-time, they're salaried, or they're a business owner and they don't take a paycheck, so they have no proof to show besides their lease, and I guess they could open their books to the city to show that they work downtown. And as a result, they either now, if they don't get a spot on Parrot, and they don't get a spot in the Parrot lot or the Masonic lot, which Masonic lot actually fills in the morning. The Parrot lot is almost always full, by the way. They have to park at Pierce Island, where they don't feel safe because they're leaving at midnight from their business after they close up shop. And while Portsmouth seems relatively safe, and I feel like it's very safe, at night walking around in dark areas as a woman, I can understand how anyone might feel unsafe walking to Pierce Island. So their only choice, they feel many times, is to park on the street and to pay the full rate, or to park off-site until it's a little bit later and they can sneak out and grab the car and move it, and then they park it on the street. So they're only paying for 4 hours of parking on street. So my concern is that we're disenfranchising the people who are running our small businesses downtown because they're not part of our workforce parking program, and we haven't allowed them to join. And so I want to make sure that we're including them all before we change a rate downtown in our parking.
Your Honor, in terms of sequencing, if the council were to find consensus and support this item tonight, which is in keeping with the parking principles, as a matter of sequencing, we now need to order and install the signage. We need to get messaging out. So in reality, this parking increase would not take effect until October 1st. So what I'm suggesting for your consideration is you could define, as a council, eligibility for the downtown worker parking program on September 14th. You could, if you saw in keeping with the vote tonight, take this vote tonight knowing that this would not take effect until October 1st. So just for your consideration.
Thank you, City Manager. Councilor Hopkins.
One thing I'd like to mention here, whenever folks have asked for exceptions or, certain programs, or can I, buy something at a resident rate, even though I'm a non-resident, The answer that I've gotten from our parking staff is it would have to be equitable across all companies. Like, we cannot just pick and choose which businesses we give benefit to and which we don't. So whenever we look at, I think changes are warranted, but keeping in mind, the city attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but from the sense that I get from the folks in our parking department are that it's just, well, it's not equitable and it might not be legal to provide certain exceptions for certain people and not others. So when we're looking at this, we really do have to look at all businesses. The Sheraton and Sarah's Bakery would get the same benefit or not, because then that just opens up a whole other can of worms. So while there is definitely a big, delta in pay and profits and whatnot and revenue, from what I have heard, it's that we can't delineate. It's either all or none of our businesses for programs like this.
Is that accurate?
I think that you've made a good argument as to why you might have certain classifications that would help defend your classifications, but I'm giving you off the top of my head.
Okay, in terms of like income
response,
eligibility
but
or things like that,
yes,
I also, I think running there's limits of what like our process allows us to do in some levels, but that's useful information. And it seems like, I guess I was surprised to find that members of the or Councilor Hopkins, was it your husband that qualifies for Novacure?
He does. So, and Novacure pays for, he gets reimbursed for parking at Foundry.
Okay, so but through the worker rate or through Novacure rate?
When he feels like showing up to show his pay stub, he'll get the worker rate, and when he doesn't, Novacure just pays the full rate.
Okay.
So that's why I don't know. I would love to see that where that's written down in the salary, because he is full-time salaried.
Yep.
And he gets the stickers at Foundry.
It's not written down anyway.
Okay.
Councilor Bagley.
Maybe we should
I'll just
clarify.
make one more point where we're concerned about the raise in parking. In 2024, we did the state mandated reevaluation, and by and large, for instance, I own roughly a median household value home, and it went from roughly $7,500 a year in taxes to $9,500 a year in taxes that year. It was a $2,006 increase in taxes. I looked up a lot of downtown businesses. A lot of them actually saw a reduction in taxes that year because their valuation didn't rise nearly as fast. It went up, but it didn't rise as fast as residential. And in fact, the hotels collectively paid over $300,000 less in taxes that year because of the readjustment and the revaluation. So the residents really got hit hard with the revaluation because the cost of residential relative to commercial changed so much. Now, albeit it went up a lot less on places like Pease than in our downtown commercial sector, and some places saw, some of the downtown places saw valuations rise as much as residential. But, as a question of fairness, my job as a counselor, I have to think of residents first. And we're in a budget scenario because of downshifting and everything else, inflationary pressures, where we're reducing our head counts in the schools. I've got to think of all of the competing things that happen as a city, and I think this is the right move. And yes, it's painful, and yes, it's going to cost people more money. But the people that live here that never go downtown, they are paying substantially more in taxes than they did prior to the revaluation. And a lot of the commercial properties are either paying less in taxes or almost the same in taxes as they did prior to the revaluation. So I think there's a lot at play here, and I'll be supporting this because of that.
Councilor Bagley? Any other discussion?
Mayor, I'm sorry.
Councilor Flynn.
I agree that we heard from a lot of residents that are in support of this, particularly those residents that are in those neighborhoods. But I feel like coupled with some of those comments were like, and we are sympathetic and empathetic to what the workers in town, the people that, I think that it's fair to say that is why people go down, right? You gotta have these places open and vibrant, and you need workers, and it's just, it's just been another piling on of costs for people. So it is hard for me to think about saying yes to this, even though I know that this is a part of the parking behaviors and that we need to do this to make it competitive, but it's a tough pill to swallow. You know, I heard from a lot of residents who were like, support the workers. This is like, you know, this is why we're going into town. This is a really, really tough thing. I know that I mean, intellectually I understand it, but another part of me is like, it doesn't feel like a good time to do it, you know? Which is, I think, why you brought it up to begin with, Councilor Bagley, you know? Put the brakes on the last meeting. I don't have a resolution, but.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Cook.
Your Honor, I have a legal question. If we move to continue consideration until the September 14th meeting, would that be too late to implement the changes by October 1st?
What are the changes again? The signage and the computers?
Signage and messaging to folks. And that grace period we typically give them where we don't enforce the increase in the fee.
It's not really, your question was about notice and public hearing.
Yeah, notice and public
We
hearing.
don't need to worry about that, but it's more the implementation issues that
We'll
we're
delay
going.
the hiring, the purchase of signs, installation.
Assistant Mayor.
I feel like while I'm not in support of this, the delay of it then somewhat feels, this is probably going to be the wrong word, but punitive towards residents as we're coming out of high tourist season, that we are, you know, it's almost like the longer we wait, the worse it is, because now it's, say, November, when it's one of the lowest tourist months, and we want residents to come back, you know, say like, hey, it's time to reclaim. We've kicked them out. Those 16 weeks are gone, and now we're like, and you know, if you
the resident parking is still $1.25.
Well, if I could.
Okay,
If
all
you
right.
haven't remembered to sign up, which we know that there are a lot of residents who still don't do it, you know, it can be seen as a little punitive. But that's my only concern with pushing it. Or like now we're kicking it into the holiday season when we're asking people again to come. So I don't feel like there's any good time except the now.
Never a good time.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. My concern is I just want to make sure that we don't somehow fail to change income eligibility or something in September. That we vote, if we vote to make this change, I don't want to be in a position that we turn around and we don't make some of these individuals who are struggling with this eligible then for the program. So without that kind of information tonight, I guess I feel kind of challenged as to make this decision without knowing what their eligibility will be. So,
Councilor Bagley.
Parliamentary question. If this was to fail tonight, how does it get brought back? Because we can't bring back something if it fails unless, I know there's like a certain Robert's Rules of Order of how it would be somebody that would have to have voted against it. You would have to bring it back in the future?
I believe it's somebody who voted for it would have to then move to reconsider, and you do that at the time of the vote.
We have to be somebody on the winning side of the vote. Not necessarily for or against it, but the winning portion of the vote. Is that correct?
Right. That's
So
what I believe.
if it didn't pass, it would have to be somebody that voted no tonight
Sorry.
to bring it back.
Right. And the rule specifically is that you make that motion at the time, the same night as the vote, that you're going to move to reconsider it,
Not at a subsequent meeting.
not at a subsequent meeting.
So if we vote this down tonight, does that mean
It doesn't
we can't
buy
bring
us
it
any
back?
more
I'm
time.
confused about order of
We can-
operations. If it doesn't pass, can we not ever bring it back at $3?
If it doesn't pass and you want to reconsider it at the next meeting, you would make the motion to reconsider it after it doesn't pass.
Okay.
The
Does that help?
suggestion might be to reopen the public hearing and to continue this matter to
You could
September
table it.
14th.
Right.
Yeah, so, okay, I'll pass the gavel to, so Assistant Mayor keeps me on point. I think that, I think it was Margot that was offering some cervical collars when it comes to this, and all of the things I think are accurate. I think that everybody that would come in would speak about wanting walkability, want to move us into a direction of less cars. At the same time, there are some realities that exist for those workers that are commuting in that don't have necessarily, one, the luxury to come to meetings and pay attention what city council does. I mean, that it takes a lot of time, and it takes a lot of, it just simply takes time. And so they could be working during this time. And many, I think, when we were having a conversation about this, or the conversation was happening, was the feeling of parking right now is $2 an hour, and it's going to $3 an hour, and more of our free parking is being taken away. And while that is accurate, it doesn't reflect that there is an extension and expansion of the downtown worker parker program that I believe right now needs some tweaks and needs some improvements. Councilor Cook and others have spoken about to include more people as a part of that. That's one. I think the idea of making passes easier to get and potentially expanding what those passes would get you would be a second one. Even things that are further afield of, are we talking about using the app? Or are we talking about using, some sort of just, you buy a permit and, that gets you into the system where you can just park at the resident rates, regardless. But all of those things, I feel as though need more time to discuss as a part of this program, because simply the fact that we're going to change, this is what will happen if we vote for this evening, according to me. The folks that came will feel as though we listened to them, and then we simply changed the parking rate anyways. Now, I feel we have to change the parking rate. Like, that is something that I've been, there is a lot of people that come to park here, and, if you park in a private lot, we have no control over what rates they set. We've tried to be able to get them to at least sign the fact that it's not a city lot, but you're paying $10 an hour to park in one of those rates, or park in one of those spots, and we would be charging $3, and we can use that difference to fund more things like a transit loop or things like that. So right now, a couple of things I think need to happen in order for us to pass, which I think, I agree with Councilor Blaylock, and, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but not right now, meaning not before we have a better clarified plan of what is going to occur with the workers, which I, would love for the landlords to take care of, but it's not. It's something that's currently there right now. Two, what we're going to use some of that extra money that we will create as a part of, doing this. Right now it's going into the parking fund, to creating a third garage. I would like to, have a better plan in terms of where we're going to fund a shuttle loop or some of the other things that have come up, currently. But I just think that, and it's literally the idea of thinking about parking for another 2.5 weeks is not something that I want to do, but unfortunately, parking is something that everybody thinks about every single day, and I believe that we need to figure out a better worker parker program that would seem as though is an actual benefit, even if it's not even if it's not perfect. Heard some ideas that we could implement this evening, and then come back as a way to fund some of those changes, an increase of the parking rates for tourists and non-residents. Lost in this is the volunteers, and I think there's been some work made on the volunteer lots that could be opened up to that. But I think that even though this is something that makes economic sense, can certainly fund some of the things that we need to take down the problem, put more people in the garages. This is something that I will eventually support, but want to be able to have a better action plan for the workers that are going to not have followed any of this, not signed up for any of Evie's petitions, and will be surprised when they're late for work and have to park on the street and look at, okay, well, the first hour of my day is going to parking. So I think we just need a little bit more time to figure out, how do we extend the parking program to more people, and then raise the rates in order to justify expending the additional money that we will spend on that.
So I think you have a motion and a second.
We have a motion and a second to pass as presented. I would support if, Councilor Moreau?
I would like to float the idea of what if we amended the motion that it wouldn't take effect to a specific date, so that would give us time to look at, but we'd still have, we'd be able to change some of the policies around the employee program, possibly even expand it, but at the same time, at least we would have this piece.
I think we have one shot at this, to be honest, and I don't know if it's passing and I understand all the reasons to do it, and I certainly understand the fact that this is going to be very painful going forward and having this conversation at a third or fourth council meeting after having this conversation for 7 different council meetings before that. My concern is that we don't control the conversation in Portsmouth, meaning that we can't talk to every individual and we can't have a conversation with, hey, we have a plan for this. What is going to come out of this, I fear, is going to be, we had a work session, council went forward with raising rates to $3, and what's going to be lost in that nuance is the efforts that we've made for the Parker programming, just having one in general, what we're trying to do to expand that. And I think that if we do change if we change the rates before we have a plan that at least is in the ether of, hey, this is like how we're going to use that money to expand access to what you have, and ultimately some of the plans of how do we get more cars off the road, make it an easier way to get into Portsmouth, take the $1 million that we give to Coast and say we're going to generate another $1 million from this. What can we do to reduce our dependence on cars commuting? If we have a credible story for that, it's a win. If we do this and then come and try to scribble out what we're going to figure out, I just don't see that is going to be I just don't think that we're going to have the ability to control the conversation, because we don't control any conversation that happens in Portsmouth. I mean, this is the only room we control, and even then it's limited. And so I would say that if we could come up with a more concrete plan of how we're going to expand the Worker Parker program and delay the increase in the on-street rates, even though it doesn't affect residents right now, and there's place for the workers to find parking, it's not going to be $3. I think we're going to lose out on an opportunity, even though I know, and I can't express how much I would like to, have this kind of recede into, just expected, but we have a chance to do not business as normal and figure out a pathway to engage more citizens and more, other folks that aren't citizens of Portsmouth but are part of our community. Councilor Bagley?
I tend to agree, and I greatly respect your opinion, Mayor, but I tend to agree with Councilor Moreau, or passing it tonight and delaying it in a sense, so there's a chance to make those modifications. We had a lot of people show up today. We have a lot of visibility. We don't pass it tonight, and I think a lot of people are going to think, okay, we won that battle. And then 3 months from now, we're going to raise prices $1 in the middle of, going into the winter season. I think we either pass it tonight or we put this on the shelf for a couple of years.
A couple of years.
Okay, so is there not a motion? Okay, Councilor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a legal question. Because this is raising revenue, what is the vote required? Is it just a majority, or do we need a 2/3?
I think it's for your fees, so it would just be a majority.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Bailiff?
Thank you, Your Honor. So just to reiterate my perception of the situation right now, I feel like we've kind of kicked them on the ground, right? We've kicked the employees, the downtown workers on the ground. They're lying on the ground right now. We don't want to kick them again, all right? But if we could come up with a plan and say, hey, we're including you in this plan, we have a solution. Once we find that, then we can go back and take care of business and make sure all the numbers work out and everything like that. But until you get there, you've kicked them down. You can't just be like, hey, sorry, this is, we already, just kick them. That's going to be the perception. I promise you. So let's just be sensitive. Like, they all came here. We had 1,900 signatures. There's people that couldn't speak tonight because we spoke for 45 minutes of the work session. So there's some people that were residents and business owners, and they couldn't stay. They had to leave. So there's no reason to rush this, but we got to do it right, guys.
Thank you, Councilor Bullock. Assistant Mayor?
I have a parliamentary inquiry, and it's not, it's directly but indirectly related to this, for non-emotion we made tonight. But if we wanted to say, at our next meeting, amend our pilot program to remove Parrot Ave, is that something that could be done?
Separate and apart from this.
Correct. Get this
fee
passes,
change.
this goes through. Is it possible for a counselor to make a motion for?
Well, I think your RAP program is a policy that you have currently, so you'd have to be moving to amend your policy.
I thought it was an ordinance.
No, it's a policy. I think I'm looking for confirmation, but I think it was a pilot policy.
The policy that kept following the packet as it went along.
Yes.
Right,
In the nightly,
yeah. So to change it is not, it would not be
It would not be three
Right.
readings all, okay,
right,
okay.
so.
Is that allows me to consider it?
I'm looking for firm confirmation from them.
Okay.
Is Jane making moves? No, she's sitting down.
confirmation. Saying that the parrot.
Both.
Listed it in the ordinance.
Great.
Okay.
I thought, I knew some part of it was
Some part of it, so it's the parrot lot versus a wrap.
Yes, you are, everyone's right. I'm a lawyer. The policy is one that the council adopted, and that is the RAP program. However, you also adopted an ordinance on the RAP zone, which includes and lists Parrot Ave. So that is in fact an ordinance. So it's Parrot Ave's baked in the ordinance, and it's also, I believe, part of the policy as well.
just a timeline question, and I know this is throwing a wrench in people, and I do apologize, but I just want to put out the scenario. If this passed tonight, and then it's September 17th, 14th, that meeting, a change to the RAP, a potential change to the RAP pilot program was brought first for first reading, then the second reading, it could fall within the same timeline of the implementation of the change of fees.
It could, if I could just address that. So if September 14th, it was first reading to remove Parrot, then the first meeting in October would be public hearing and second, and if you suspended your rules to pass third and final, it would be the first week in October that you could conceivably remove Parrot through the ordinance, and all you'd have to do is remove it from your policy once. You don't have to do the second and third. So conceivably, it could time with early October, if that's helpful.
And I bring this up for two sides of the coin. Obviously, we heard a lot from the workers of that space. We have had, no movement of what we are really going to do for volunteers, for library overflow. We're hearing from those other neighborhoods forward that they're seeing more overflow now. So in hindsight, and I've apologies, Carl, Ben, and everyone that loves the data, that even without the data, we're already starting to see minor ripples and repercussions that are only going to potentially grow. So I just want to put it out there timeline-wise, if we're thinking that if this passed tonight, and we're thinking that it's October-ish timeline for this to really be implemented, I just would wonder if that's the base that I'm kind of is wondering that in that same timeline, could we possibly amend the RAP program to remove what seems to be one of the artillery zones that have really triggered people, which is that Parrot Ave. That's all. Sorry, guys. I just wanted to make sure I was.
Could we change it faster if we just changed the fee on it? Like,
To
it's
three?
Yeah, this is just like on the Parrot Ave lot, or the Parrot Ave.
Ave, not the lot.
Not the lot. If we just change the Parrot Ave, could we just remove the fee from that without 3 readings?
His fees now moved, right?
I'd have to review what we say in the ordinance. The Parrot Ave, I believe, is specifically called out for the worker parking program and the rates in the ordinance.
So
I'd
we'd
have to
remove
look at it again, but that's my recollection. You could pull it from everything, and you could, again, the timing of whatever ordinance you want to change could be done with, in early October if you did, for whatever you want, first reading in September 14th, and then public hearing second, early October meeting, and then suspend rules third and final. But that would require consensus.
Yes.
And so that's what's tough with something like this, with so many different elements
Yeah.
that are just being brought to the council's attention. How do we want to adjust and move forward? How do we amend this pilot over the next year?
And do we amend
And
it?
do
Or
we?
do we just run I just wanted to get clarification of timeline, that if it's something that came up that we wanted to amend it, it could be potentially done within a period of time where these fees would be enacted.
The other issue is, this is obviously a new process with fees being adopted by the council. I am trying to recall what was in the actual budget for the wrap rate as well. I believe that came forward in the budget approval, if I'm not mistaken, as well. So again, you have a hearing, you can change your fees, but we wrapped an ordinance prior to that change. You know what I mean? We created that ordinance before it was determined that you guys would just pass parking fees as fees at one hearing as opposed to ordinance.
Sorry, I just.
Well, we certainly had enough, we've extended the meetings on that quick change. But Councillor Cook and then Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Jane.
I think it's important to remember that the reason that there's availability for the workforce parking program right now on Parrot Ave is that is now metered. Whereas before, Parrot Ave was always full, almost 24/7, lots of long-term parkers. So we would be removing the availability of the workforce parking program there. So they might actually lose parking spots, not gain it by taking Parrot away and making it available for everyone again. Because really there was a lot of long-term parking.
Is there a timeline limit on Parrot Ave?
What was that question?
Is Parrot,
72 hours.
Parrot
72.
Ave is also 72?
Everywhere in the city is
Everywhere in the
72 hours, everywhere. And so the Parrot Ave lot and Parrot Ave simply just have that 72-hour requirement everywhere in the entire, even in front of your house. But we don't enforce it there. Councillor Bagley, Councillor Morrow.
I mean, we've received several emails from residents specifically about Parrot Ave and how they're coming downtown more to shop or coming downtown more to volunteer because they can find parking on Parrot Ave. I'd be against removing Parrot Ave because that seems to be the part that's working the best in the whole system. I mean, if we want people to be able to come downtown that live here in town, and we've given them an opportunity to get downtown and have a decent chance of finding parking with a relatively easy walk into town, to me that looks like a win.
I'm not saying it's not, I'm just.
Councillor Morrow.
I'm pretty sure I remember from fee study committee that we actually set the 30 cents per hour plus transaction fee and the other fees. So we didn't actually put the fees in the ordinance. We actually put it up to the fee study committee. That's what I remember, because I remember at fee committee, we actually set that.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So I just, because we were talking before that the fee was in the ordinance, I don't think we pulled all fees out and put it to the fee committee.
For precisely that reason, to give flexibility.
Correct, so that the council could make those changes with just one hearing in the middle of the program if we wanted to. Just wanted to remind everyone of that.
Yeah, because weren't we thinking about changing the wrap area program as a part of the ordinance previously? Because it had been different than it was in the garages?
Correct, because it had originally, they were matching the garage, and we wanted to match the on-street parking. So we set the wrap period, the wrap rate to equal whatever the on-street downtown rate was without escalation.
Okay, I mean, so conceivably, we could amend this to say, you know, the rate goes to $0 per hour, provided you are a downtown employee on the Parrot Ave lot. And people.
Parrot Ave Street.
Parrot Ave Street, yes, oh my God.
Do
We need
not
to-
say that.
We're gonna change the, yeah, so, but I'm just saying, we could do that, still require workers to sign up to get the pass and the parking, and conceivably, the enforcement of that would be paid for by the increased parking rates that we would have otherwise supported, but we would need to renotice. That would be a substantial change, and would need to have this at the next meeting if that was the case.
Right, again, this is not an ordinance, it's a fee change, and it's kind of a new process, but given that that would be a substantial change, I would suggest another public hearing.
Councilor Cook?
And let me just note, if we do that, we are going to be pushing a lot of the workforce onto Parrot, who would normally be parking in Foundry. So we're going to have to potentially expand that space to maybe even the Parrot lot. And I'm saying that because I know that our middle school workers will be coming back to work in this month, and suddenly we're going to occupy a lot of Parrot Avenue with them parking in that zone. So
I'm sorry.
Councilor Cook, Assistant Mayor?
I guess I would, as we talk about this continuously about the school employees, I would have to be under the assumption, or I am under the assumption, that at some point, someone from City Hall, as we've developed this project, has talked to the school about, and if they were.
They are not charged.
They're not charged. Okay. That is what I understood, but I just want to make sure
The
that.
library too.
Or like substitute teachers
County.
charged?
No, teachers are not charged.
Substitute teachers?
teachers, I believe, are charged. They're not charged.
Or like Little League volunteers and stuff, or umpires, or?
I would like them included. I don't know if they are yet,
Yeah.
Rich, but,
Yep.
or Councilor Bullock.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that because I feel like that has been a big conversation of where are they going to park. I would assume that the staff has addressed that, handled that, and we.
So, I mean.
The cause, it's always kind of been a cluster down there, and it will always.
We're making it worse.
Be a cluster, and there's always been places for people to park. So, I think we should just call this vote, and then we'll go to the next storage issue.
So if the vote fails, and there's no amendment to the vote on the table or considered at the moment, what would what occurs after?
If the vote fails and no one makes a motion to reconsider the vote,
And reconsider at a future meeting, or reconsider just again, right now?
you'd have to make a motion to reconsider at the next meeting. And it's Rule 16 for your rules, and you can only have one motion to reconsider any vote during your term. So,
Like during our 2 years?
yeah.
Oh.
Per issue, not just,
Per
it's not
issue.
like a
Oh,
mulligan.
per issue. It's like, that's the only time we can ever do that?
It's not a
sorry.
mulligan. It's
Sorry.
not like,
Wanna know?
something that.
Only one motion for that vote.
Okay.
Motion to reconsider any particular vote. Yes, sorry.
I definitely heard that wrong.
So,
All right.
You get one challenge.
Yes, I would much prefer that we
I
had
prefer it that way.
a way to tie this to something that seemed more of a benefit. I understand the point of trying to right-size the rates, but I just don't think that our ability to get information out is as fast as this will feel, and I think that there's an opportunity to engage more people. So I would like to see this at the next council meeting when we have a plan for the Worker Parker program that seems a little bit more thought out, but at the moment it doesn't seem like we have that. So we'll do a roll call vote on this, and we'll see what happens if it ends in a tie.
Tava, where are you? By there's 9. You need a roll call?
Roll call.
Okay. Didn't know if I should start or not. Assistant Mayor Kelly?
No.
Councillor Cook?
No.
Councillor Blaylock?
No.
Councillor Bagley?
Yes.
Councillor Moreau?
Yes.
Councillor Flynn?
No.
Councillor Hopkins?
Sucks being last.
No, the mayor's last.
Oh, the mayor's last.
Yeah.
Oh, great. I'm voting yes.
Mayor McEachern?
Where are we at now?
We're at
Four
4 to
noes,
3.
3 yeses. 3 yeses, 4 noes.
Correct.
What happens if it
So
does?
it fails anyway.
You have to pass it by a majority.
Okay, no. So it fails because it's tied anyways? Okay.
Your Honor, I would,
It's not tied, though. It was 5 to 3.
Correct.
5 to 3.
No.
No.
5 noes, 3 yeses.
Oh, okay, so, all right.
Your Honor, I would make the motion to reconsider this at the next city council meeting on October 14th.
September.
September 14th.
September. Wow.
Is there a second?
Second.
And if I can speak on it?
Yep.
I think that hopefully we can have a little bit more of the information back and some ideas from staff of potential workforce, downtown worker ideas. And besides ideas, just some of the requests for data that we asked for at the work session by then. So there can be things like when we talk about Foundry, we asked for data on the usage of that, how full that is getting, all of those things. So if we can have some of that data back by that meeting, I think that will help at least myself be able to support this adoption.
Councillor Cook?
Thank you, Your Honor. Yes, I echo what the Assistant Mayor says, and also I would love to see what parameters the staff thinks we should set as far as qualification for the program, and how people can prove that they qualify for the program, especially someone who is a business owner and doesn't necessarily take a paycheck, and is kind of essentially an independent contractor.
Councillor Bagley?
Yeah, thanks, Your Honor. I won't be supporting the motion tonight. I think we had a lot of people show up. We had a lot of attention. That's the time to make unpopular decisions. I will not support any motion to increase street parking for the rest of this council term.
Okay.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
2.
Can I who's the second opposed? Okay, thank you.
It's not often I agree with Andrew.
Well, that's good. We can bring you two together, then who knows what's possible. All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. Good evening and welcome back. On to the city manager's items which require action.
Thank you, Your Honor. First up is a request to hold a work session solely for the topic of rolling stock. And historically, it's really almost served as a footnote in and around the CIP process. And we're going to have the kickoff for the CIP coming up this evening. But what we'd like to do, because we've gotten some questions in the past about how rolling stock is comprised and can you explain more about the replacement schedule, we thought it would be helpful to give it its own work session. So we would propose to do that in and around the formation of the CIP. So we would propose to hold that right before the council meeting on October 26th of this year.
Your Honor, I move to schedule a rolling stock work session at 6 p.m. on October 26, 2026.
Second?
Any further discussion?
Yes, I have a question. Sorry. When would be a good time to bring up something like biofuels, since the electrification of the city fleet, it has been, put to the side? What other options could we explore, and when would be the best time to explore them as far as sustainable transportation options?
I think it'd be great to know now that we can provide that as part of
I would request
the work session.
I would request that for this work session. Then what the the landscape is with biodiesel and alternative fuels, since electrification has been pushed to the side for now.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Item B would be a request to rescind City Council Policy number 2018-02, the license fee for the encumbrance of city property. As you will recall at the last meeting, we now have that incorporated into Chapter 6, so the policy is essentially rendered no longer applicable. So we're looking to rescind that policy tonight.
And move to rescind City Council Policy number 2018-02, license fee for encumbrance of city property.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item C is a request to hold first reading of amendment to Chapter 1 Administrative Code, Article 3, Boards, Section 1.302D at the September 14th City Council meeting, and this is relative to appointments, tenure, and removal. And in the same way that we have recently updated procurement notification, we would look to make that same modification here to remove the requirement of a newspaper publication and to rework notice provisions to be more flexible, such as on the city website and through the city's means and methods of channeling information. So for your review and consideration in advance of the filing for first reading, we would have Suzanne Woodland, Regulatory Counsel, come to present on that matter.
Your Honor, I move to schedule first reading amendments to Chapter 1 Administrative Code, Article 3, Boards, Section 1.302D, appointments, tenure, and removal at the September 14th, 2026 meeting.
Second.
Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to thank the city manager for bringing this change forward. This is probably long overdue. Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item D is a request to establish polling hours for both the New Hampshire State primary and the general election, and in accordance with RSA 659:4, the council does determine those polling hours. And based on past midterm election years, we would request that the polling hours for the primary election on September 8th and the general election on November 3rd of this year be established from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
I move to set the polling hours for the New Hampshire State primary election on September 8th, 2026, and the New Hampshire general election on November 3rd, 2026, from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m.
Second?
Any discussion? Councilor Bailick.
No, I think these hours give everyone opportunity to vote, but I also feel like we don't, that is a long day for anyone working the polls, working the election sites, but it's reasonable.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Item E is a request to approve the custodial supervisor's tentative agreement in your packet. It is a 3-year agreement which grants us increased flexibility on health and dental insurance plan and carrier considerations, and includes an annual 1% increase in the contribution of health insurance on the part of employees, and a COLA increase in wages based on the 10-year rolling average of the CPI at 3.03, retro to July 1st of this year.
Your Honor, I move to approve the proposed custodial supervisor's tentative agreement as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Next up is approval of the tentative agreement with AFSCME 1386A, and I'm pleased to see one of the union reps, Andrew Holdsworth, on Zoom. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. Very similar to provisions in the custodial supervisors, along with some others specific to the AFSCME 1386A folks. And just as a point of reference, all members fall under DPW across all divisions. That's the group that makes up this union.
I move to approve the proposed AFSCME 1386A tentative agreement as presented.
Second.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. Item G is my last item, and it is a request relative to a donation of a memorial bench at Bohenko Gateway Park in honor of Sue Werner Thorson. Typically, a donation in and of itself would come under grants and donations. This one is a little different in that we are receiving a check that should cover most of the cost, but in the event that donations do not cover fully all the costs related to this bench, there are funds available in the Public Art Trust, and therefore the second part of this, it's a two-part motion, would be to allow the city for the release of funds from the Public Art Trust, and in this way we have satisfied the requirements of the put forth by the trustees of trust funds in how we direct the funds. So there are two specific motions here tonight. But I would like to add that Sue Thorson was able to see the completion of the wonderful work of the Endeavor as part of the 400th, and noted that there was the absence of benches with back support. So that's what Bob's trying to do tonight.
Your Honor, I move to request the City Council accept a $10,000 donation to the city from Bob Thorson to be used towards the bench, and vote to accept any additional financial contributions towards the bench from Bob Thorson, the Thorson family, or other private donors.
Second.
Councilor Blaylock.
Thank you. I'm very happy we can help honor the Thorson family. They've been such generous members of our community, just selfless, just outstanding. But yeah, my heart goes out to the Thorson family.
Thank you. Councilor Blaylock, agreed. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Your Honor, I move to authorize and direct the trustees of the trust funds to disperse such sums from the City of Portsmouth Public Art Trust as directed and certified by the city manager, that such funds are needed to complete the design, fabrication, and installation of a sculpture memorial bench to be installed in Bohenko Park, not otherwise paid by private donations. Such sums may include, without limitation, payments due or obligations satisfied under a contract with CJA Chen, and any incidentals that might fall outside of said contract. Funds shall come from the Capital Improvement Program contributions to the Public Art Trust. No further approvals of the City Council is required.
Second.
It was a long one.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
All set. Thank you.
Oh, we're through your, all right, now we have the consent agenda.
I move to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Next, we have the CIP kickoff presentation.
Yes, we do. Deputy City Manager, Finance Administration.
Nothing like
Is here.
10:05.
Hello, Nathan.
Good evening, folks. As the city manager pulls up my 75 slides, I warn you that, that this could run long, and I apologize for that. Actually, you've seen all of this before. It's an important part of our CIP. We talked a month ago about the CIP citizen portal being open early in July. It remains open. We'll reference the dates in a moment. Our committees have opportunity to kick in suggestions, and our citizens as well. Our CIP, Capital Improvement Plan, in earnest for fiscal years 28 through 33, kicks off now, which is really a signal as much as anything to staff as the departments begin to work on bringing together their submissions. Tonight, we just have a few slides to remind you and the public about the Capital Improvement Plan. First slide up is a definition. Next slide, thank you. First slide up is a definition about the CIP and what it is and why we have it. It is for us a long-term, multi-year financial and infrastructure planning tool, and it helps serve the purpose of helping us maintain safe infrastructure in the city, help us coordinate financial strategies for the capital projects that we undertake, and assist in the achievement of citywide goals. The CIP process and the document that we create at the end communicate to our residents about capital needs. They contribute information to the development of the annual budget each year and promote maintenance of and safe access to our city infrastructure. Next up is just a quick definition. What is it that qualifies as a CIP project? There are a handful of categories, six, a half dozen actually. First, the construction or expansion of public infrastructure in general, major rehabilitation of a public infrastructure, planning or design related to a capital project, so the early effort, any significant non-vehicular equipment purchase, large vehicle purchases, generally with a 10 or more year lifespan, and the acquisition of land when appropriate. Over the last couple of years, we worked really to refine the rubric with which proposed projects are evaluated and our priorities considered. The capital improvement process considers three core strategies. The first of those, does the project fulfill a core function of the city? That may be regulatory expectation, public health and safety needs, or addressing something substandard in conditions throughout city infrastructure. The second category is, does the project achieve a financial benefit to the city? That may be matching funds being available or efficiencies being achievable through synergies with other projects, or maybe reductions to operating costs that we seek as a part of our budgeting process. The third is, does this project address a community plan or some service improvement? Maybe it will satisfy the objectives identified in our planning study that we've worked on. It'll improve or add capacity to some existing city service. Maybe it drives further economic development, or it responds to a request of our residents. So what are they? How are they judged? How then do we fund them? First up is, well, let me say, we lean on two major funding streams in addition to and beyond state and federal and private funding. We have our local capital outlay, and we have borrowing through municipal bonding. The first of those, capital outlay, is our pay-as-you-go funding option. Capital outlay represents dollars that we appropriate every year as a part of the general fund annual budget. And the target for our capital outlay is to invest at a level of up to 2% of the prior year budget. That's one of our financial policies. You'll read about that in the financial policy section of the annual budget document. And this, I changed the language just because I thought it was important as you look at the graph. Our goal is that we move this in the direction of 2%, and as we are able and can afford to, we're using these general appropriations to invest in capital infrastructure. You can see from the graph that we got close in FY18 to 2%. Certainly through the pandemic, we backed off on some of that cash infusion of capital projects. This last cycle, after the amendments that we made to the budget, which were in the area of capital outlay, our FY27 capital outlay is 0.96% of the prior year's appropriation. The second then of those funding alternatives or funding streams is municipal borrowing. And we do this with multi-year repayment plans through municipal bonding. Annual payment of principal and interest we refer to as debt service. And our policy is that the target for net debt service is to remain below 10% of each year's annual budget. This last year, FY27, stands at 7.64%. And the chart shows you the 10% bar, but it also gives you a sense of what the out years of our most recent 6-year CIP looked like. I think it's important for us to call out that every year in the last, I think the analysis that we did was 15 years, every year we come in the 7.5%, 8% range generally. The out years often look larger, not because they will be when we get there, but because as we go through the management exercise of deferring things that can be deferred and trying to limit the scope of our net debt service year over year, we push projects into the out years so as not to leave them behind or forget them, but to defer them. If we look at the next slide, which considers a 10-year run and looks just beyond the 6-year outlook, again, only based on what we have and what we know, this includes our net debt service. This includes all of our ongoing projects or past projects for which we are continuing to make principal and interest payments against municipal borrowing. You should not walk away concerned that if you look in year 5, 6, 7, 8, those numbers are up near 10% or over 10%, because our exercise has been that by the time that becomes the year that we're making decisions on, that will have fallen back into the 7.5% to 8.5% range. It's important to note that these are all based on last year's CIP. They do not include any projections of anything new we've been discussing. All of the project information behind this graph is based on June 30 of 26, the end of fiscal 26. No new projects added, and and we look forward this year to trying to put a little more substance into the 10-year cycle. The CIP will continue to be a 6-year, but the departments are working to make sure that we at least identify projects that reasonably are in the 10-year horizon.
Nathan, I think before you leave this slide, it's important to note that this includes the initial debt amount for the municipal complex project of 42.2.
The 42.2 initially envisioned. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I won't read to you, but there's a number of additional comments here about our CIP process. These are excellent for posterity and for those who will download this as a resource later. It's important, I think I want to emphasize, as we often do, that capital project approval has really 3 steps. This CIP plan is the first step. We consider through the development of this with the council and the planning board's participation and that of our public, a plan for 6 years of capital investment. The plan is recommended ultimately by the planning board and then adopted by the city council. Your timeline has included that happening in December in most recent years. The second step is that the first year of the approved CIP, as it's finalized, it's in December, becomes a part of the proposed budget that you'll see in the spring. Doesn't mean that it all stays in that proposed budget, but the first year of the adopted CIP plan becomes a foundational block in the budget that we present in the spring. And finally, any long-term borrowing that is in the approved CIP that works its way through the second step of the budget comes back to the council, as we did a month ago, for the consideration of bonding authorization. So the council and the public all see any of these projects at least 3 times for very formal discussion. The timeline is here so that you can refer back to it. I would call out all of the little human figurines represent opportunities for public input. We are tonight here, the kickoff of the council, the kickoff of the CIP. I mentioned the citizen submissions of citizen portal submissions of citizens requests. Those due on Friday the 18th of September. Your departments will make their final submissions on by the 25th. And then we will have a citizen request subcommittee of the council that will review those projects that have been requested by citizens. That is scheduled now for the 8th of October, 6 o'clock. I believe we'll be in conference room A. And then we start in earnest with the council and the planning board with a joint work session November 12th. You'll have a public hearing at your November 16th council meeting. The planning board will be invited to attend to hear the public's input. The planning board will consider it in November, and you'll be hopefully adopting the CIP in December. Only to make sure that the public has access, citizens' requests are available for submission through the portal, which is at the link at the bottom of this screen. All of the submissions that come in will be reviewed by staff to put some substance to them and help us to delineate those that are potentially already CIP projects, those that are not eligible by definition to be part of the CIP, and those that are and may become CIP projects. And then we also have to address that in some cases the requests that are made are better served alternatively, and we work with the residents to make sure they understand what those are so that we can pursue them in that direction. The meeting I mentioned again, October 8th, I commend that to you. Our CIP process that kicks off now with the staff. Any questions, certainly would be happy to try to address those.
Councilor Bullock.
Thank you. Will the CIP subcommittee get to see these resident requests before the meeting? I just know in the past I've been on that committee and I kind of get blindsided.
Did you get blindsided with it?
Yeah, you know what I mean, and then I have to make all my analysis and
I think it's quite reasonable you want to see those in advance. Yes.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. Appreciate it.
Councilor Hopkins.
Thank you. Nathan, could you go into a little bit more, because to me, as someone new to engaging with city government, submitting a request for CIP sounds kind of scary. Can you talk a little bit about what that would look like? Can I just write down anything? Does it have to be in a certain format? Do I have to have citations? Like what are we asking the public for in the simplest terms?
So the best answer I can give you is that the portal is pretty intuitive, and that when you kick to that link and log in, it'll ask you for contact information. It'll ask you to describe the location or facility. It'll ask you and prompt you for some elements, and then it provides you a fairly open narrative. And all of the suggestions or the comments that you made have been among the submissions that we've received. Some of them are very straightforward, they're very succinct. I need a sidewalk on XYZ street, and some of them are much longer in terms of the detail that is provided, references and the like. No expectation really. This is your community and your process as residents as well as council. And so for residents, once you've identified yourself and to the best of your ability, the location or nature of your need, and then describe it narratively, that moves forward in the process. Staff will do their best without changing the scope or trying to amend the request. Staff will work to try to wrap that with explanation about facility expectations, needs, legal requirements, and the like, and flesh that out in our process. So we're really looking for residents to provide us with the pain points that they think need to be addressed, and we'll do as much of the legwork as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Cook.
And thank you, Your Honor, and thank you for the presentation tonight. I just wanted to encourage our residents to submit requests for the CIP if you see something that needs to happen in the community. This year, we're completing the Little Harbor School Playground project, and that was brought to our attention from parents in the Little Harbor School, letting us know that that project absolutely needed to be done and needed to be done sooner rather than later. And so it's because of residents who bring issues forward to us that we see the things that need to be improved. And I'm very excited for our new playground at Little Harbor, which is the first of 3 playgrounds at all of our elementary schools.
Absolutely. And that all started with a conversation that parents brought to the process. I guess I would offer one clarification. If it's broken and it's dangerous and you identify something, we have click and fix, and you should let us know. This is this is not for acute care. This is, these capital requests are for things that you would prefer to see that would make your life in the city and the lives of your neighbors better. If you see something that is of critical mass or of acute nature, obviously we have a mechanism for that as well.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Nathan. Looking forward to this process once again. All right, next up, email correspondence.
Your Honor, I move to accept and place on file.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? An appointment to be considered is the appointment of John Jack Holzman, to the Zoning Board of Adjustment. This took a little bit longer because we had to notice the vacancy, and he will be being appointed, if he is successful, to the full member vacancy that was created, and with the departure of Paul Mantle serving out the rest of his term, and we'll have a vote again in January.
Their terms end, I think, the end of November.
End of November, so very quickly thereafter. And then, so that's just appointment to be considered. Appointment to be voted would be the appointment of Wendy Ellip to the Sustainability Committee.
And move to appoint Wendy Ellip to the Sustainability Committee.
Second.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Wendy, for stepping up to serve. Again, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am just reporting out on the legislative subcommittee meeting that we had this last week. We will be attending the New Hampshire Municipal Association's annual discussion to adopt their proposed legislative policies, and the committee met and registered our views on the policies to be discussed at that meeting. You'll note in the packet that there is a memo that outlines the policies with which we had questions and which we decided to register our opposition. So I think it's important to note that we don't always agree with all of the policies, but when we do attend, we register our opposition or choose to not express an opinion on items that we think are nebulous or confusing and would not make sense for the City of Portsmouth to support. So you will see that in your packet. I'm happy to answer any questions, as I'm sure the other committee members are as well. So I would move to approve New Hampshire Municipal Association's 2027 to 2028 proposed legislative policies and principles as recommended by the legislative subcommittee.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Cook. Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Councillor Bagley.
Thanks, Your Honor. Where's my motion? I move to direct the city attorney to review the attached proposed ordinance language regarding automated license plate reader systems and return a final draft ordinance to the city council for first reading. I guess second, I'll speak to it.
A second.
Yeah, as Commissioner Scher mentioned earlier tonight, they're commonly known as flock cameras, but that's really just a brand name. I believe the cameras that we use currently are not flock brand, they're a different brand. But what's happened with the acceleration of license plate reader cameras and the combination of AI and video is we've seen it in states outside of New Hampshire that it becomes a surveillance tool that can be abused. Right now we have RSAs in place, thanks to Commissioner Scher in his state rep role, preventing the sunsetting of the existing law. However, it's not to say that that law is not overturned at some point in the future. So I think it'd be worthwhile to investigate if we can pass municipal ordinance that takes advantage of that law, just in case it is sunset in the future. It adds an extra point of friction and an extra chance for the public to come and express their opinion. I think generally the public sentiment is we don't like being tracked.
Thank you, Councillor Bagley. Councillor Moreau.
I'm just wondering if we could also amend the motion to also send back for a feedback after it's drafted from the police commission.
I would accept that. Oh.
What I guess as I read it, and I know that it was an email, so I want to make sure that I have it Right. I guess I was surprised to hear the police commission members' concern around erecting fixed cameras on city land, why there would be any jurisdiction for the police to do anything like that without the express written permission of the city of Portsmouth. I understand they could use these in their cars or mobile units, but a way I understood that the draft ordinance was written was that it would be preventing any kind of fixed camera on city land or buildings. And I don't believe that that would run to the ability or run afoul of the separation of powers within our charter.
Thanks, Sharon. I agree with your opinion. I am not 100% sure that, based on emails I received, that the commission, or one of the commissioners at least, agrees and thinks that maybe the council's overstepping its bounds by having this discussion, which to me means all the more reason to have the discussion in public.
Certainly, yeah. I guess I'm happy to. I guess it would be a question for the city attorney on, and we'll get back. Maybe it's easier to have her draft something that comes back to us, for discussion around this.
I can do that, and I can also share that the chief of police and the commission, at least Commissioner Schur, have significant concerns about the proposal, and we'll probably want to address those with the council at the appropriate time.
Okay. Councilor Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm happy to discuss the delineation between whose roles this falls under, whose role this falls under, but I would note that these cameras have not just been used for law enforcement purposes, they've also been used for insurance enforcement purposes, and general tracking beyond law enforcement. So this is not just a law enforcement function that we are discussing.
Can I just clarify that might be true in around the rest of the country, but in New Hampshire, the use of these types of license plate reader systems is only authorized to law enforcement and under very strict controls. The statute's very detailed in terms of how they can be used. They have to be registered, they have to be policies, etc. And the information can only be held for a certain period of time, like 3 minutes. So other states, however, do not regulate them. So what you're hearing from other states around the country and how they've been abused, these types of equipment cannot be used outside of law enforcement legally in New Hampshire.
So, and sorry to jump in on Council Moreau's
Kind of
motion.
jumped all over.
You guys were agreeing so well. I guess in terms of this would come back at first reading. Again, I think that the effort to have the conversations in public on this would not be prohibited in terms of first reading or second reading on this to be able to speak to. After first reading and once we see what's before us, I think maybe a way to thread the needle would be to send them a draft of what is going to come back for first reading so that they're prepared to speak, ahead of, public comment before we have first reading, and then certainly they'd have the opportunity to speak at second reading. But I think it's pretty clear in terms of the city buildings and what we would do, and the feelings of many in Portsmouth and New Hampshire that want to make sure that while the police have every ability to enforce, in their cars, I think there was even a draft for temporary, temporary locations to be used during the event of an emergency. But I think the permanent affixation of these cameras to buildings or public lands in the city of Portsmouth is something that a lot of people would have, or at least want their voices heard on through the council vote. Councilor Bagley?
Yeah, I would just say, Your Honor, and I'm not going to bore everybody reading it tonight, but I did put in the packet. It's about a page long. It's fairly technical and uses, the technical terms, but it does have a lot of carve-outs for different types of uses, but all with the caveat of oversight. As I never get tired of saying, but I wish I didn't have to, we're Dillon's rule state. We can only do things when we have enabling legislation. This legislation was due to sunset this year, but Commissioner Scher, as a state rep, eliminated the sunset provision. But that's not to say next year it gets overturned. As we know, the State House makes new laws and regulations every year. And if we have something in the books now, when we have the ability to put something on the books now, I think it serves us well in the future. And that's the reason for my bringing it forward. Because of that sunset provision, I'm worried that it will be forced out in the next couple of years.
So I'll just add to the conversation for, I've been looking at where this could go in our ordinances and looking at the law. I mean, and looking at the charter issues, there are potential charter issues here. There are potential issues that the state has preempted this field in terms of trying to regulate it in any way. But on the other hand, I've also looked at the council's authority, and your main authority is your control over city property and the use of city property. So I'm still trying to balance all those concerns. I haven't come to a final legal opinion on all of that, but there are a lot of issues at play. And certainly I think that the police commission would welcome the opportunity to have an opportunity to contribute.
Sister Mayor.
And I don't know if this would have to be, within an edit to the motion, but I would certainly like to see a memo back from the city legal department outlining kind of all of the things that the city attorney just mentioned, ideally prior to or in conjunction with a proposed ordinance language. Because I think an ordinance can read one way, but without the backstory of why it's written a certain way, I think it can, I think it's good for the public to be able to see the memo and the council to be able to see the memo and all of the different touch points that have to go into considering if we can even write an ordinance or if that needs to come again from a charter department or not. So I don't know if I can just request that or if that has to be added as an amendment to the motion.
You have
Well, so I guess maybe City Attorney, would you be writing this would you be writing an ordinance that conflicted with our charter?
So there are questions about, who controls, the operations of the police department and their, investigative abilities and the equipment that they use to conduct their investigations. So as long as they're in compliance with state law, to have the city council chime in, those are the concerns that the commissioners raised in the first instance. So I'm happy to do a report back prior to any final draft or a draft for first reading, if that's what the council would prefer.
I guess the question is, would you be able to create a chart, an ordinance that, could we just change the rules slightly to say, or a draft summary of the ordinance as presented, or a report back saying why it can't be completed?
I guess that's what I was trying to get to.
Is that possible? Because we're not going to be able to pass an ordinance that we deem as illegal. So if in the process of finding this, you find that it is illegal.
Yeah.
So an
Okay.
either or, is that possible
Sure.
to do? Would that satisfy the maker of the motion?
I think, if the city attorney comes back and says that the council has no authority on flock cameras, then that's the city attorney's opinion.
Okay.
So do you need to amend your motion?
I think the motion is suitable for my request.
Okay, so then I guess I would make an amendment to your motion to.
Well, I guess the request is I don't know how Councilor Bagley can request something that's illegal. So if it comes back and the report back is stated, this is, like, we can't make this, then that's the end of that, and we have a conversation on what would need to change, and if there's a willingness to look at the charter to prevent the installation of surveillance cameras on city buildings and property. Further down the field, but if we can't come back, we'll come back with a different, conversation. But I feel like the motion as it's presented allows the city attorney to make an opinion, make that opinion known, and sometimes it come back and says, we can't do this because of X, Y, and Z.
Sure. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to go past 10:30.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed.
Okay, that's only 3. The motion on the table as presented by Councilor Bagley, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, now we're on to Councilor Hopkins.
Your Honor, I move to approve and accept the action sheet and minutes of the August 6, 2026 Parking, Traffic, and Safety Committee meeting.
So moved.
No, second.
Second.
I love your enthusiasm.
I said not past 10:30.
All right, any discussion on this? All in favor?
We have something about minutes, hold on.
Oh, wait.
Minutes related to parking and traffic safety. But I would ask if Jane could come and explain what she's...
Oh, okay.
What she's trying to tell us. Yes.
Just to clarify, the city council, it was almost like a report back for parking, traffic, and safety on those 2 elements and on those 2 specific motions. So the action is PTS recommends the 2 motions. As you may remember from the last bike lane issue, when we accept the minutes of the PTS and their actions, it's being endorsed by the council. But I just want to clarify that because it just says recommend the motion, that these can move forward without binding the council on those specific motions on Fleet Street.
Okay.
Just to remind you all that because it was really basically a report back from you, Mayor, to say, hey, did the PTS actually address the parking, the lane and the parking on one side of the street? And they went back and they did, but it isn't binding the council by accepting the action.
That is great.
Thank you,
Jane.
Thank you, Jane.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. City manager's informational items.
I have a quick one, Your Honor, and it's a report back request that you made at a recent meeting. Staff has discussed ways to balance the priorities of those private landowners, particularly working in the downtown, needing to perform work with those who seek to move safely through the city, such as workers and tourists and shoppers, to limit the obstacles and opportunities which could negatively impact the livelihood of our small business community who depend on that foot traffic to move about safely. So what is under discussion is a different set of rules, I'll say, during peak season versus non-peak season as a means to hopefully incentivize non-peak activities wherever possible. And we appreciate the needs of business owners and yet recognize the need to limit the negative impacts during the peak season. So if we were to define the peak season, it would just roughly be June 15th or right around Market Square Day through Columbus Day weekend. And in the same vein that we talk about this, the city was mindful to take up many of the very disruptive improvements on Congress Street in a non-peak manner. And so we are, in the same way we are trying to do this, we want private developers, private landowners, private property owners to do the same. So more to come, but that's the report back for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, City Manager. I know it doesn't always feel like we're not doing it during the peak, but you guys buttoned it up, and I ran down Market Square Day, and you guys are going to have to, or we are going to have to pull it back up, to finish it before next year. But it is something that I hopefully will give some relief to some business owners. Anything under miscellaneous? I'd wait a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Good night, Portsmouth.